Chapter 1236. There was no toilet in this world that was stronger than Lord Ma. Not only was he an enlightened spiritual monster who had seen the buttocks of the men from the Wang family, but he was also a spiritual monster who controlled the toilets of the entire earth. If he reached the standard of a grade 4 enchantment, this range could be expanded. As Wang Ling's chief disciple, he naturally knew how powerful Lord Ma was. This kind of teleportation ability could only be described as heaven-defying. This matter is all thanks to Lord Ma. Audiobook listened to Immortal Zhenyuan's explanation in the Great Hall of True Venerated. He couldn't help but mutter to himself again. Who is Lord Ma? Sunny Yuan sat on the guest chamberlain's chair and revealed a curious look. Lord Ma was an enlightened gremlin, so of course Audiobook couldn't reveal his identity. However, he didn't want to lie to Old Man Sun, so he thought of a reasonable explanation. He's an excellent courier. Then the courier has done a good job. Sunny Yuan was also full of praise. He is indeed dedicated. Audiobook nodded. Lord Ma's professionalism wasn't just for show. He heard that Lord Ma was in a relationship recently, and his love partner was the cosmic god tree that had previously drained his nutrients. This should be the first among all the monsters in the Wang family's small villa to be single. What was even more unexpected was that Lord Ma, who was no longer single, actually didn't look that young. However, as the saying goes, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Miss Cosmic God Tree liked Lord Ma, so there was nothing she could do about it. It could only be said that it was worthy of being a spiritual monster that was enlightened by Master. She was clearly in love, but she still completed her mission. Hearing this, Immortal Zhenyuan couldn't help sighing at Audiobook's eloquence. He could turn the story of a greedy girl begging for fertilizer into a love story of a dedicated courier. Audiobook was indeed a rare talent. How long will the test take? Old Man Sun sat in the guest seat and took a sip of tea. He had been observing Immortal Zhenyuan since the beginning, because this was another expert he didn't know. In his heart, he was glad that he didn't really make a move just now. Otherwise, he would have no place to hide his old face. This Shan Zongtian was too terrifying. Nameless experts at the level of sweeping monks were everywhere. This was King ridiculous. Immortal Toya is already experimenting. It should be soon. However, in the end, I'm afraid that our battle sex medicinal laboratory is not as advanced as Mr. Sun's groups. Speaking up to this point, Audiobook narrowed his eyes slightly and smiled. Everyone knows that Huagua Water Curtain Group built the first 5th grade elixir laboratory in the country. Unfortunately, our battle sect is currently short on funds, and we still have so many disciples to feed. We still can't afford to open this laboratory. Sunny Yuan choked on his saliva. He wasn't a fool, and of course he understood what Audiobook was hinting at. No, this already couldn't be considered a hint. In Audiobook's view, it was already clear. However, Sunny Yuan did not intend to accept this. The construction cost of a level 5 pill laboratory was especially expensive, at least 1 billion immortal gold. With this amount of money, he could open a new sky-class sect. Any investment must pay attention to the return, and he was not a philanthropist. He was a businessman, and he would not invest without a good reason. Contrary to Sunny Yuan's expectations, Audiobook actually didn't continue pestering him, and instead changed the topic back to Keon. Mr. Keon, I remember that the SBP Foundation was also founded by the International Alliance of Cultivators back then? That's right. Keon nodded. This was a fact that everyone knew, so there was nothing to hide. Let me get a little gossip. How much did you invest in the initial establishment? I think it was 1.5 billion immortal gold, and that's just the operational investment. If you add in the equipment and site, the total investment is already over 3 billion. Does the foundation also have an elixir laboratory? Yes. It's a level 5 pill laboratory. It was built by Michio Nation's Torinos Pill Company. That can't be right. It costs a lot to build a level 5 pill laboratory. Which entrepreneur would invest for no reason? Audiobook had an incredulous expression on his face. Mr. Zhua, you have to believe that there are still people in this world who are true, kind, and beautiful, and who sincerely contribute to world peace. Keon's words were very sincere. After saying this, he glanced at Sunny Yuan out of the corner of his eye. Of course, not all outstanding entrepreneurs have this kind of awareness. Hearing this, Old Man Sun's hand holding the teacup started to tremble. He was now especially regretful. He shouldn't have chosen to come to Battle Sect from the very beginning. Wasn't this clearly extortion on the basis of morality? From start to finish, Audiobook hadn't asked him to help Battle Sect set up a laboratory. But after gossiping with Keon, every word Keon said struck at Audiobook's heart. It was the kind of strike at the heart that killed and strike at the heart. As an outstanding entrepreneur, Sunny Yuan indeed felt as if his conscience had been shaken. At this point, looking at Sunny Yuan's expression, Audiobook knew that the matter of the Battle Sect's Level 5 laboratory was basically settled. Although this old man Sun didn't say anything, his heart had probably already sunk into a deep moral vortex. Although his methods were a little despicable, there were times when despicable and shameful, but they were useful. Since things had already progressed to this point, there was naturally no way for Audiobook to stop. In the end, he stared at Sunny Yuan and added the final blow. I know that Mr. Sun is an outstanding entrepreneur, and definitely has the same corporate conscience as Torino's Pill Company. Of course. Sunny Yuan took a deep breath and gritted his teeth as he stared at Audiobook. Don't worry, Mr. Zhua. Once this matter is over, my Huagua Water Curtain Group will invest in the construction of the Battle Sect's Level 5 laboratory. How can I accept this? Hearing this, Audiobook immediately got up. What virtue or ability does my Battle Sect have to accept such a big gift from Mr. Sun? But then again, this is definitely of Mr. Sun's own free will, right? Otherwise, if word gets out that my Battle Sect is coercing you, we can't afford to lose our reputation. Old Man Sun did his best to maintain a smile. Of my own free will, all of this stems from my entrepreneur's conscience. And so, in this delightful conversation about entrepreneur's conscience, it was as if Audiobook could hear his teeth grinding. But he was certain. This probably wasn't an illusion. It was already 2:12 in the morning on Thursday, November 26th. He hadn't fallen asleep yet. After finishing his homework, he had been secretly assisting in the investigation of the Foundation. According to the clues left behind by Warden Liang, there were 7 main envoys behind the scenes of the Foundation. Book of Sage Immortal listed these 7 people in detail in front of Wang Ling. This was the relevant information extracted from Warden Liang's soul memory. And his soul was already under Wang Ling's protection. Position 1 Moon. Gender unclear, but a gentle person. Position 2 Star. More intelligence than the others. Claims to have prophetic abilities. Position 3 Sunday. Always exudes a sense of justice like a big brother. Position 4 Judgment. Host of the meeting. Voice shrill and funny. Gender unclear. Position 5 War Chariot. Like his code name, his style is full of violence. Position 6 Fate. A man of few words, but can always give hints at critical moments. Position 7 The Fool. Always leaves the meeting midway. Very mysterious. After reading this, Wang Ling felt like he was playing werewolf killer. Then, among these 7 people, who on earth was the Void Spy, and how many wolves were there? Chapter 1237. St. Pius Cathedral, the base of the Moon Emissary. The glazed glass roof of the cathedral shone with a rainbow of colors under the sunlight. Sitting in the middle of the cathedral, one would have the illusion of living in a rainbow illusion. For every believer who believed in God, this was undoubtedly the closest place to God. A nun in black robes and a veil stepped into the cathedral. She walked up the wide aisle, and the bright moonlight shone through the top of the wall, illuminating the tranquil face of the Moon Emissary. The Moon Emissary gazed at the mural of God on the prayer altar with her silver-white eyes and prayed devoutly. A moment later, her thoughts were led, and her whole body turned into a black shadow, sitting in the spiritual space. No one could have imagined that the legendary Moon Emissary's true identity was nothing more than a nun of a church. At this moment, she sat dignifiedly on a bench in the spiritual space. At this moment, the Moon Emissary felt like she had become God, looking down on all living things. The existence of the Foundation greatly satisfied her vanity. And this was also the reason why she had agreed to join the SBP in the first place. The Moon Emissary opened her eyes. The neatness of the people in this meeting was somewhat unexpected. All 7 emissaries were here. Reliable news. Snake was killed by a fighter from the battle sect, and Cohen betrayed us. The judgment emissary, as the host of the meeting, told everyone the unfortunate news. Everyone present had different reactions to Snake's death. The most shocked person was the moon goddess. With his strength, he actually died at the hands of the battle sect. What a useless piece of trash. The chariot emissary hammered the table, looking very angry. Didn't he find out anything before he died? Not at all. The star emissary smiled slyly. The information he had obtained was no less than that of the judgment emissary. I'm afraid even the judgment emissary would not have thought that Snake would die at the hands of a battle sect's security guard. Security guard? The rest of the people fell silent upon hearing this. Many people's hearts trembled wildly. It wasn't just the judgment emissary. Everyone here seemed to have underestimated the combat power of the battle sect. In this day and age, how could there be a lunatic sect that used a true immortal as a security guard? Snake's strength was at half-step true immortal. Just a little bit more, and he would be able to leap into the realm of true immortal. To be able to defeat Snake, even if he was a security guard, he would at least have the strength of a true immortal. I've already organized the scavengers to temporarily retreat. I don't know if anyone has any opinions or thoughts. Subai looked at each and every one of them. As the host of the conference, the legendary judgment messenger of the Foundation, he felt that he had seen through everything. After becoming a higher-level creature, their ability to obtain information was naturally extraordinary. He could communicate directly with the Void Master and ask for his help. Let the Lord use the supreme power of the Void to give him all the answers he wanted. Therefore, he already knew the identity of every single person here, including the residents of every single emissary. Snake's death was something he had long foreseen. As long as the Void Orb existed, he would be able to absorb Snake's soul immediately after his death and transform Snake into a high-level ethereal. At that time, as long as he killed anyone here, and then let Snake invade the Void, he would be able to control one more emissary. After that, as long as he repeated the above actions, the entire Foundation would fall into his hands. But right now, the most important thing was still acting. He couldn't directly reveal everyone's identity, and Subai was deeply conflicted as to whose body he should let Snake invade. He had to observe first and see who would dare disobey him. It's too dangerous for the scavengers to remain in Wuxia. I think we should withdraw them all for now and wait and see. At that moment, Sun Messenger said, the scavengers have done a lot for the Foundation over the years. Once they fall into the hands of another country, everything the Foundation has done will be exposed. But the problem is, Cleon is already in their hands, isn't he? Tank continued to slap the table in an unusually irritable manner. The scavengers have higher priority than these investigators, and they may not know about the scavengers. Sun Messenger insisted on his point of view. All these years, the scavengers have done nothing that can be used against them. They've done a great job, haven't they? Tank was furious. I still don't agree. The death of the scavengers is tantamount to the Foundation being humiliated in another country. We must get back at them. The dispute between Sun and Tank was to be expected. Their personalities were as different as heaven and earth. But after both of them expressed their views, there seemed to be a focus of discussion in this meeting. As usual, whether the scavengers stay or leave will be decided by a vote. The minority must obey the majority, Subai said as envoy of judgment. Sun Messenger was considering the Foundation's long-term development, but he seemed to prefer Tank Messenger's way of handling things. In any power struggle, if all the plans were too conservative, sooner or later the Foundation would be nibbled away. Under his control, the Foundation had to grow stronger. Therefore, it was crucial to establish the Foundation's prestige. Subai wasn't afraid of Battle Sect at all. In his opinion, Battle Sect was nothing more than a stepping stone for the Foundation's development. It was destined to serve him. I support Tank's view. So he spoke first to express his opinion. It was rare for the host to express his opinion first. Looking at this scene, Sun Messenger instantly felt a hint of anger rise in his heart. He had the feeling that he was being targeted. When he saw the other envoys vote one after another, This surging anger was on the verge of erupting. Moon. Star. Fate. What on earth do the three of you mean? Sun Messenger questioned the three of them. Moon, haven't you always advocated peace? Why would you agree with Tank Messenger's violent style? Nun Moon was silent. She actually didn't have her own opinion, and following the crowd was her usual practice. Star Messenger. Although Sun Messenger's words are reasonable, I always follow my own judgment. At this time, Sun Messenger looked at Fate. Like before, Fate fell silent again. Finally, everyone's eyes turned to the only person who didn't express his opinion. The fool, what do you think? Subai stared at the black shadow sitting at the back and narrowed his eyes. The fool often left midway through a meeting. This was the only time the fool didn't leave. But now it seemed that the fool's vote was meaningless. Even if he voted for Sun, this vote was destined to be won by Tank. In the silence, everyone seemed to hear a rustling sound, as if someone was chewing something. Who's secretly eating snacks during a meeting? Subai asked in surprise. Everyone looked in the direction of the sound. They were surprised to find that the sound came from the fool in the 7th seat. It was coming from the black shadow that the fool had transformed into. Although they couldn't see the fool's face and could only see a black shadow, they could clearly see what the black shadow was doing. They saw the fool seem to have opened a new bag of packaging, took out the seasoning packet, and skillfully tore it open and sprinkled it in. Then he put his hands together and crushed the snacks. Subai's heart skipped a beat when he saw this. From what he knew, the fool was not like this. He didn't have a hobby of eating snacks. But who was this fool? And this action of opening the bag of snacks seemed a little familiar to Subai. His gaze touched. Deep in his heart, an inexplicable sense of fear was awakened at this moment. Chapter 1238. Half an hour before the Foundation meeting began, Book of Sage Immortal had divined the identity of the fool, one of the 7 envoys. It suggested that Wang Ling used the temporary possession spell to enter the body of the fool. This kind of possession was temporary and could achieve a temporary soul exchange. The advantage was that it could infiltrate seamlessly without anyone noticing. So Wang Ling wasn't really the fool. What Wang Ling hadn't expected was his habit of secretly snacking raised questions among the other envoys present. Fortunately, he hadn't been completely exposed. The most important reason was that Subai didn't believe that the fool was Wang Ling. It couldn't be this person. In that instant, the word impossible flashed over and over in Subai's mind. According to the information he had gathered, the fool's true identity was a woodcutter who lived deep in the mountains, and his name was Joyce Tan Lang. Joyce Tan Lang was very strong, but he had a miserable life. He had a younger sister who had been possessed by an evil spirit since she was a child. This tyrannical evil spirit had been entrenched in his sister's body all year round, and refused to come out no matter what. Apart from cultivating hard to make himself stronger, Joyce had also been looking for a way to get rid of the evil spirit. At the same time, he had been looking for a way to get rid of the evil spirit. Unfortunately, Joyce had dragged things out for too long. The evil spirit and his sister's souls had fused together, and they were now inseparable. Joyce had been able to keep his sister alive. He had no choice but to take her to live in the mountains, where spirit chi was abundant. Because of this, the signal in Joyce's mental space had always been unstable, and this was also the reason why the emissary of the fool often left the meeting midway. So, a woodcutter who had been living in the mountains all year round with his sister who had been possessed by an evil spirit. Why did he suddenly have the habit of snacking? Subai had his doubts. But he didn't believe that the woodcutter was the fool. It was the man whom he had been longing for revenge. He had been planning everything, but he hadn't even officially launched his plan. All of the actions should be seamless. There was no way that man would have thought that he was the mastermind behind all this. So there had to be a mistake somewhere. Or perhaps the Lord of the Void had missed some of Joyce's habits. If this was a woodcutter who loved to eat snacks, it would make sense. Joyce had sacrificed so much for her sister. He had visited so many powerful beings and remote places in search of the secret method to dispel the evil spirit. He must have his own pressure. Some people relied on typing on the keyboard to relieve stress. Some live on whiskey. Some people relied on recommendation votes and monthly votes. There were also people who shamelessly relied on drag to relieve stress. Of course, it did not rule out the possibility that some people ate snacks to relieve their stress. Subai nervously swallowed the saliva in his mouth and spoke. The fool. Don't you have anything to say? He still firmly believed in the Void Lord's judgment. He confirmed that the envoy sitting in the 7th seat was the old woodman Joyce. Not the man she wanted to take revenge on. His innocence was not the slightest bit empty. But now was not the best time for revenge. He just needed a little more time to prepare. I agree with Tank's opinion. Finally, the voice of the fool was heard. This slightly rough voice made Subai heave a sigh of relief. He was sure it was Joyce's voice. And his tone was exactly the same as Joyce's. In that case, 6 chariots and 1 sun. The Foundation will draw up a follow-up plan based on Tank's suggestion. After saying this, Subai made his final decision in the mental space. The meeting came to an end. In the bedroom of the Wang family's small villa, Wang Ling opened his eyes. At the last moment of the meeting just now, Wang Ling had cancelled his temporary possession spell. He returned the body to its rightful owner, Joyce Charcoal Lang. This was a good brother who knew how to dote on his little sister. Wang Ling didn't want to implicate Joyce because of him. He had already signed a soul contract with Joyce, so he had the right to possess Joyce at any time. In return, Wang Ling promised to help Joyce cure his little sister. The evil spirit had already fused with his little sister's soul. But for Wang Ling, it would only take a flick of his finger for him to extract the evil ghost. Of course, Joyce was touched by Wang Ling's body. He felt that his unwavering devotion to his little sister all these years had touched the heavens, and he had been redeemed by God. After Wang Ling cancelled his possession, Joyce knelt down on both knees and raised his hands in prayer, as he looked up at the sky and thanked God with the most devout eyes. Joyce Lord, thank God. If you mainly use my body, you're welcome to possess me at any time. Wang Ling. Is it done? At that moment, Wang Ling turned his gaze to the tablet on the table. Although Wang Ling already had the thought of giving it away. So, he had to give it away. But for the time being, April was still useful. While my lord was possessing me, I already figured out the identities of the people in the spirit space. Book of Sage Immortal gave the results of its deductions. There was no doubt that the 7 members of the Foundation were all foreign cultivators. But that didn't rule out the possibility that some of them were colluding with the General Alliance. Among them, the probability of Tank colluding with them was as high as 87%, and he was a key target for observation. Wang Ling clicked on Tank's information. He discovered the real full name of Tank's emissary, Toy Dre. He was the big boss of a multinational spirit sword production company, and controlled more than 20 large spirit sword production factories. Every year, some of the mass-produced spirit swords in Huaxiao Nation came from Toy Dre. What astonished Wang Ling even more was that this Toy Dre actually seemed to be related by blood to someone Wang Ling knew. According to Book of Sage Immortal's bloodline analysis, Toy Dre's DNA was actually highly similar to E. G. Yang's. The two of them were actually father and son, but E. G. Yang had been alone since he was a child. It was only after General E had taken a fancy to his talent that he had accepted him as a disciple. His life had gradually gotten better. To be honest, if it wasn't for this bloodline data, it was hard for Wang Ling to imagine that E. G. Yang had foreign blood. It looked like E. G. Yang might have inherited more of his mother's genes. And his mother was definitely an authentic Eastern beauty. Keep investigating. Wang Ling continued to give orders to Book of Sage Immortal. He needed to know who on earth E. G. Yang's mother was. As long as his mother was on Earth, he would be able to find some suspicious clues through a large database. It might take some time to find them, but Wang Ling had plenty of time now. In fact, in the data provided by Book of Sage Immortal, Wang Ling also discovered another interesting set of data. That was the inference about the identity of Messenger of Judgment number 4. Although Book of Sage Immortal gave a 76% probability to a person called Michelle, there was still a 24% probability. It was very likely that this Michelle had already been switched. Baija. Wang Ling stared at this familiar name and smiled in his heart. He hadn't expected this cockroach to be so tenacious. Chapter 1239. Today's Baizhou indeed couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as before. Wang Ling could sense that Baizhou's combat strength had improved significantly, but the only thing that hadn't changed was his excessive self-confidence. Excessive self-confidence was conceit. This was also why Wang Ying had taken a liking to Baizhou at first, but hadn't put him in an important position. Baizhou was certainly strong, but conceited could easily cause trouble. So the question now was, how strong on earth was Baizhou? After Book of Sage Immortal examined him, it gave a definite answer. My lord, he seems to have already become a hollow spirit. Had he really been invaded by the void? Wang Ling wasn't surprised by this result, because he was well aware of President Bai's hatred for him. In order to defeat him, President Bai would rather not be human and become a so-called higher-level creature. Wang Ling could feel this hatred even from across space. Do you have a specific estimate of his combat strength? Wang Ling asked Book of Sage Immortal. It's not easy to calculate because my current understanding of void creatures is still limited. But the first thing Baizhou did after becoming a hollow spirit was to absorb Devil Gut Fungus Lord. This is a creature that has been enlightened by my lord. So right now he might be stronger than Wang Zhen at his peak. Above venerated immortal was Tao Master. In other words, this person's current strength was indeed immeasurable. Back when Wang Zhen had come down from Ninefold Star to seek an explanation from him, Wang Ling actually wasn't afraid. With one glance, he could tell that Wang Zhen could probably withstand 5 slaps from Wang Ling at his peak. By punishing Wang Zhen, the Heavenly Tao Governing Committee had actually saved his life. Otherwise, Wang Zhen's soul would have long been destroyed by these 5 slaps. President Bai, who was now called Su Bai, was now stronger than Wang Zhen, which instantly piqued Wang Ling's interest. Was the 10 dragon subduing slaps, which had been sealed for so many years, about to be unsealed? Elsewhere, the initial test results for the red decoction were out. Immortal Toya had never seen a substance in the decoction before. But after comparing the medicinal properties, Immortal Toya was able to find a spirit plant with a similar effect from the existing stock of medicinal herbs on Earth, but it was far less effective than the red decoction. In the Great Hall of True Venerates, Immortal Toya took out a round azure magic ball. By touching the magic orb, he could project the images in his mind into the void. First of all, we can confirm that the spirit plant used to brew the red soup does not exist on Earth. Let's call them void plants for now. Immortal Toya said. After a reliable comparison, the medicinal properties of this void plant are similar to those of returning grass on Earth. Returning grass? Hearing this, Sun Yuan nodded slightly. He was in the production of medicinal pills, so he was naturally very sensitive to the names of some spirit plants. The returning grass was a rare and endangered spiritual plant. It was also the main ingredient used to make the resurrection pill. It could draw back a person's soul at a critical moment and save a person's life. It was used for those critically ill patients to hang on to air. As Mr. Karoun said, ethereals are a type of high-level creature. It took them a very long time to evolve themselves to the point where they have no form and are like light and wind. And when it invades the bodies of human cultivators, it actually causes great harm to them as well. Immortal Toya said, if we compare Su Ling to a brand new software, then the environment for human cultivators is like an old system. The two can't be completely compatible. That's why they need this kind of tonic to make themselves adapt quickly. Ajwa raised his eyebrows. That is to say, when they invade a human body, they will in fact cause some harm to themselves? Immortal Toya nodded. In theory that's true. But the truth is that as long as they adapt to a human body, their strength won't be affected. The only thing to be aware of is that if the container they live in isn't strong enough, it's very likely that it will break. And they won't die. When the time comes, they just need to switch to a new container. Simply put, the process of adapting to a human body is when they are at their weakest. If we take action at this time, they won't be able to effectively use their strength. Given our current strength, there's still a high chance that we can defeat them and eliminate them. Immortal Toya explained the situation to them. Then he turned the magic orb in his hand to show them a newly developed purple reagent. This is the ethereal detection reagent I just formulated. It's colorless and odorless based on the restraining effect of returning grass. Only ethereals who have drunk the red soup will have a reaction. What reaction? Audiobook asked. If it's just a smell, the person invaded by the ethereals will feel a foul stench. Immortal Toya said. If the reagent is injected or comes into contact with a human body, in a very short period of time, the person invaded by the ethereals will instantly lose their hair and become bald. Everyone. When Immortal Toya said this, everyone suddenly had a strong sense of déjà vu. You imagine if the ethereals completely broke out in the human world. If they used a reagent to detect them, then it was possible that the world would be filled with bald people. Now, because of irregular lifestyles, even the hair loss rate among college students was increasing year by year. Not to mention those in high-risk professions who had to stay up late for long periods of time. Programmers, media personnel, medical staff, teachers, web novelists. At this thought, Audiobook couldn't help trembling as he shivered all over. This was really a reagent that made people feel bald. I don't think we can just kill someone with a stick just because they lose their hair, right? There are still a lot of people who are bald now, Audiobook said. Killing them with a stick definitely won't work. Immortal Toya said. So for those who have already lost their hair, the best way is to smell it. As long as they don't feel nauseous, there's no possibility of them being invaded by the ethereals. When the time comes, we can give them a certificate or something. But how can people who have been invaded by the ethereals accept it so easily? I've also thought about that. Therefore, this matter must be a diversion. Immortal Toya said. The flu has been prevalent recently. I believe they won't refuse as long as we say it's a flu test. If they really don't cooperate, we can use the reagent in artificial rain. When the time comes, we just need to keep an eye on the streets to see if there are any people who have lost their hair after getting caught in the rain. At that moment, Sunny Yuan heaved a deep sigh and took off the wig on top of his head. Audiobook. Mr. Sunny Yuan. Work is always stressful. A few years ago, I took hair growing pills every day, and now my body has developed a resistance to them. Then I gave up resisting. Everyone. Chapter 1240. The successful development of the hollow test reagent finally gave everyone in Battle Sect a glimmer of hope. Their war with the hollow had already begun. But unlike previous battles, there was no smoke in the early stages of this war. Audiobook's goal was very clear. 1. They had to figure out who on earth the hollow were looking for. 2. They had to strangle the hollow in the cradle before they found the key person, and officially launched the void invasion. I'll take the reagent back, Old Man Sun said at that moment. Huagua Water Curtain Group had many stores, which could allow Immortal Toya's reagent to be produced in large quantities in a short period of time, and shipped to its stores all over the country. Sunny Yuan had already thought about turning all the stores in his industrial chain into invisible hollow monitoring points. Using the spell fusion test reagent to create artificial rain over a large area was the worst plan. Because there was a risk of alerting the enemy, Sunny Yuan put on the wig again and tidied up his clothes. He had never made his baldness public before, but this was a special case. Since Battle Sect was already an ally, making it public was actually a sign of trust. Then I'll leave this matter to Mr. Sunday. Audiobook. Immortal Jin Yuan and Immortal Toya cupped their fists in salute. We'll get through this together. Sunny Yuan's expression was solemn as he cupped his fists in return. Then Old Man Sun left in a hurry with Immortal Toya. As the reagent developer, Sunny Yuan had already made an exception to hire Immortal Toya as chief engineer. Developing reagents was also a frontline job. Immortal Toya was deeply proud of this. Doctors were benevolent, and alchemists were also medical workers. Immortal Toya was naturally duty-bound. And so, in the early morning of November 26th, thanks to Battle Sect and Huagua Water Curtain Group's cooperation, the ins and outs of the whole matter had basically been figured out. Although there were still a lot of doubts about the matter, the general direction had been set. In just a few short hours, Immortal Toya had swiftly developed a reagent to detect the hollow. This speed was jaw-dropping. We've already started work on the reagent, but Mr. Keon, there's something else we need your help with. Not long after Old Man Sun and Immortal Toya left, Audiobook turned to look at Keon again. Keon was a smart man, and actually knew very well what Audiobook wanted him to do. To be honest, he wasn't mentally prepared. Now Keon's mood was abnormally tangled and nervous. Audiobook saw that the hand he used to light his cigarette couldn't stop trembling. "I'm not afraid, I'm just..." Kun tried to explain. "I understand." Audiobook stepped forward and patted Keon's thick shoulder. Now, the responsibility of revealing the truth had fallen on this man's shoulders. After finishing the cigarette, Kun pressed the cigarette butt into the ashtray at the side. Then he took a deep breath and tried his best to calm himself down. "Mr. Joa, I'm ready." Kun stood up. Audiobook had already prepared a live stream room on his side, and everything Keon said would be broadcast online to all over the world. In the information age, the power of the internet could not be underestimated. Once the traffic piled up, it could be even more terrifying than the power of live TV. According to the plan, Keon would reveal the ins and outs of the entire incident in 2 parts. In the first stage, they could not reveal anything about the arcane church for the time being. They needed to let the detection reagents run on the market and distinguish between friend and foe. When the time was right, the second stage would be when the truth would be revealed. Keon would reveal everything that the Foundation had asked him to investigate for the past 20 years. This would also include the truth about the Void invasion. Of course, in order to protect Keon, Audiobook would protect Keon's identity in the first stage, and would only report the first incident as a researcher in Battle Sect. As a result, in just the morning of the same day, the video of the first stage of the War Sect's report spread across the entire internet at lightning speed. Daoist Guang was the head of Battle Sect's online information department. With the help of the current Big Brother in the live streaming world, the speed at which the news spread was simply appalling. In the morning courseware, Wang Ling realized that most people were discussing this matter. The main thing was that in order to let the test reagents circulate, and also so that the arcane church wouldn't be suspicious, Audiobook had exaggerated the report a little. In number 60 high school alone, a lot of students and teachers were starting to panic about their hairlines. After class, there was a long queue at the entrance to the men's and women's toilets. It wasn't to go to the toilet, it was to look in the mirror. Is the bald head flu virus that Battle Sect is talking about real? Is there a virus in this world that can make people bald? In class, Hirogwa stroked his beautiful hair to confirm that it was still very healthy. The person who was least worried about this matter was Superchin, because he had a buzz cut to begin with. For him, to be bald or not to be bald. Actually, there wasn't much of a difference. F***K. I saw some people online say that they're already bald. They lost a lot of hair in one night, and they suspect that they might have this bald head virus. At that moment, someone cried out in alarm as he scrolled through his phone. Where? Let me see. Hearing this, everyone gathered around to watch the excitement. This was just a screenshot of a chat log. It was full of text, and there weren't even any pictures. Wang Ling sighed disinterestedly. Now that the bald head virus was a hot search topic, there would always be people who liked to take advantage of this opportunity to freeload. The internet spread too quickly, and without a full understanding of the unknown, it was very easy for people to believe all kinds of rumors made up by people with ulterior motives and marketing accounts that had popped up online. As it turned out, people were even more afraid of baldness than of coughing and fevers. After Audiobook's announcement, Huagua Water Curtain Group very quickly set up testing sites across the country. They even mobilized all their employees to carry out epidemic prevention work, set up testing sites in major public places, and linked hospitals to isolate suspected people. This kind of reaction speed was already godlike. In fact, the vast majority of people weren't at risk of baldness. All this was just a pretense to identify a hollow spirit. Sitting in his seat, Wang Ling quietly watched the performance from the Battle Sect. On one side, someone was working hard. On the other side, someone was vigorously spreading rumors for the sake of traffic. In just one morning, ginger and garlic had been sold out in the market, just because a marketing account said that garlic and ginger could prevent hair loss. Wang Ling, I remember that you have garlic-flavored crispy noodle snacks, right? Do you want to contribute some? At that moment, someone turned to look at Wang Ling and asked. Wang Ling's heart was on the verge of collapse. This person, what the hell was he thinking? Chapter 1241. Audiobook's move could be described as catching everyone off guard, and catching them off guard. Apart from Battle Sect and Huagua Water Curtain Group, the other two forces who had been fighting over Cologne earlier were also in a daze. Bald head virus. What is this? In the ancient castle, Subai vaguely felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. He asked the Lord of Void for advice, and the Lord's answer was, they could use this matter as a cover to speed up their invasion of the Void. They could let more ethereals join the operation to find the people they wanted to find. For the first time, Subai, who used to be a human, had some doubts about the Lord of Void, but he didn't dare disobey him. It was the Lord of Void who had given him everything. Since he could give it to him, if he was unhappy he wouldn't take it back. At that moment, Subai realized for the first time that ethereals had a disadvantage as advanced creatures. They were used to living a carefree life in the world of the Void, and had never experienced the deceit, lies and mutual deception of the human world. To put it bluntly, this group of ethereals, including the Lord of Void, were a bunch of honest people through and through. Now Subai could only pray that things would go according to plan, and that this so-called bald head virus storm wouldn't turn out to be some kind of trick. In the short span of one morning, the bald head virus storm swept the world and became a hot topic among the people. How to guard against this terrifying influenza virus instantly became the focus of all cultivators' discussion. Some experts said that washing hands and wearing masks weren't enough, because this bald head virus could also be transmitted through contact. For example, if someone who was already infected with the bald head virus stroked their head, it could also cause hair loss. Wang Ling knew that this was, of course, unreliable nonsense. But the problem was that there really were people who believed this unreliable information. Take number 60 high school as an example. That afternoon, an epidemic prevention team formed by the cultivation police and the local health department came to number 60 high school and took away several bald-headed teachers for investigation. Old Antique explained again and again to the epidemic prevention personnel in thick protective clothing, "Brother, I'm really not sick. I don't have much hair to begin with." In that short moment, Old Antique even had the urge to revert to his gorgeous itinerant true form. In his gorgeous itinerant form, he had long, elegant, waist-length hair. The feeling of being misunderstood was really unbearable. However, the epidemic prevention personnel did not listen to the explanation at all. The order they received was that they would rather kill everything by mistake than let a single one go. "Teacher, please cooperate with me first. We will bring you to the testing point later. If there are no problems, you can leave on the same day. Now please cooperate with the van." The attitude of the epidemic prevention personnel was very firm. Old Antique had no choice but to cooperate. The trunk of the minivan had already been treated to expand the space. When Old Antique entered, he found that the space had already been divided into several individual areas. This is a separate design to prevent cross-infection. "Brothers, where did you all come from?" Old Antique tried to get close to the people next to him through the transparent space wall. "Hey, my name is Shirai Shishio. I'm a monk. My name is Baldy Pippi, a short and bald author." As suspected cases from all over the country were taken away for testing, the epidemic prevention work was carried out in an orderly manner. Things weren't over after Old Antique was taken away. Just before school was over, everyone was told to stay in school for a school-wide screening. Every student, teacher and staff member had to be examined. No one could escape. The method of examination was also very simple. It was to spray test reagents on the top of one's head. As long as there was no large-scale hair loss, it was proof that one wasn't infected with the virus, and one could directly receive a free mask before going home. To prevent cross-infection, the tests were carried out according to class. Everyone whose number was called would gather at the entrance of the stadium, where a temporary testing point had already been set up. When it was number 60 High's turn to wait, Wang Ling blinked as he stared at Class 2, which Feng Xing was in. So far, all the tests had been normal, and there had been no abnormalities. As far as he knew, the number of spiritual invasions at the moment was still very limited, and it was very unlikely that someone from number 60 High would be infected. The spiritual spirits needed hosts with strong physical qualities, and generally wouldn't target students who were only at the foundation establishment stage. Up ahead, the teacher in charge of Class 2, Teacher Lu Ruoxu, was in the middle of an examination. This teacher Lu taught mathematics, and had previously taken over Wang Ling's class. He was an expert at the peak late golden core stage, and was proficient in calculations. To be able to become the teacher in charge of an elite class proved that Teacher Lu indeed had some skill. In fact, there weren't many female teachers in the school who could show their face. Teacher Pan was one, and Teacher Lu was another. Don't you feel that the quality of Teacher Lu's teaching has been getting better and better recently? Don't mention it, old Pan is having a headache over this, said Hirogua. Remember the test 2 days ago? Our class and Class 2 took the test together. And in the end our average score was 10 points behind Class 2. Was it during the break after the national competition? Said Superchin. That's right. Old Pan exploded with anger. Even if we didn't take the test, it's still a little unreasonable for the other people's scores to be 10 points behind Class 2's average. Otherwise, with Su Xiao leading the way, the gap would have been even bigger. Hirogua sighed and said, and it's not just our written test scores that are bad, our class's experimental scores are also lagging behind. Using an induction cooker to refine pills, and causing it to explode, what a talent! Just adjust the formula according to the ratio. Add water, and it'll be over. When he said this, Hirogua deliberately spoke very softly, so that he and Superchun could ridicule each other. Although what he said was the truth, if other students heard it, it could easily affect the unity of the class. According to Hirogua, it seemed that Teacher Lu Ruoxu had recently become enlightened in teaching, and had found a new teaching method, which enabled the students in Class 2 to learn new knowledge faster. Wang Ling's class had been in the lead previously, and this sudden fall behind was naturally a huge blow to Teacher Pan. In a short 10 minutes or so, Teacher Lu Ruoxu, the teacher in charge of Class 2, led the inspection of Feng Xing's class. Before leaving, Lu Ruoxu was stopped by an inspector. Teacher, you should also take the test. All right. Teacher Lu very cooperatively sat down. The inspector sprayed a test spray on Teacher Lu Ruoxu's head. Then, a scene that made everyone terrified happened. Teacher Lu Ruoxu's originally beautiful hair suddenly changed dramatically, as if she was suffering from great pain. Her face began to twist and contort, and she couldn't help scratching at her scalp with her hands. It wasn't clear whether her hair had fallen off naturally, or had been torn off uncontrollably. In less than 10 seconds, all of Teacher Lu Ruoxu's hair had already fallen off. Quick! Control her! The inspector and the surrounding students and teachers were all startled. Teacher Lu Ruoxu, who had gone berserk, had completely lost control. Boom! Bam! She abruptly stomped on the ground, and her whole body swiftly flew out, crashing through the gym ceiling. A pair of red high-heeled shoes pierced deep into the floor of the stadium like nails. It looked like this hollow spirit was trying to escape, but Wang Ling wouldn't let her do as she pleased. He would use the great gravitation spell. He immediately decided to use the gentle spell as much as possible. Without harming Teacher Lu's body, he would keep her here. But in the next moment, a huge light flashed on the horizon. A meteorite fell from the distant starry sky. It was directly in the direction of number 60 High's gym. The corner of Wang Ling's eye twitched. He had tried his best to control his strength, but it seemed that he had still used a little too much force. Chapter 1242. Wang Ling had indeed held back when he had attacked. He had used a condensed version of the Great Gravitation spell, which was only used on Teacher Lu Ruoxu, who was trying to escape. This was a lock-on skill. But Wang Ling hadn't expected the condensed power to actually be able to trigger a meteorite in space. He really had. He had only used a little bit of his power. But in the end, this was still his fault, and he had to think of a way to get rid of it. Otherwise, when the meteorite fell, the huge explosion might flatten all of number 60 High. No, an entire district. But to be honest, Teacher Lu had indeed become very strong after being possessed by Su Ling. The Su Ling and Teacher Lu had merged perfectly, and Teacher Lu's body had also been strengthened by the Su Ling. For Wang Ling, this was an experiment. because he had yet to fight the creature on the other side of the gate of the void. This was a good opportunity to test the waters. Affected by the great gravitation spell, Teacher Lu, who had wanted to escape the gym, fell from the air and crashed heavily into the ground, creating a huge pit. Her expression was ferocious and terrifying, and her eyes were bloodshot and her pupils were silver gray. The Su Ling inside Teacher Lu's body had completely given up on concealing itself. In the face of the crazed Teacher Lu, all the staff at the test station retreated, and several security personnel rushed to the front to cover her. They had to ensure the safety of the remaining students. At that moment, the deafening noise in the gym caused a lot of students to come out of their classrooms and stand in the corridors to watch through the windows. Little Peanut was scared out of his wits and trembled all over. This is me going bald, but I've also become stronger? The students in class 2 were also stupefied, and they all swore to the heavens. Teacher, I won't copy homework anymore. I'll pay attention in class. Boo-hoo, teacher, I won't go to class anymore. I'm deleting the daily life of the immortal king. I don't want to read this lousy book anymore. They had never seen what a crazed Teacher Lu looked like, but the aura she gave off was indeed shocking. This was already no longer a power that a normal Golden Core teacher could wield. What surprised Wang Ling even more was that Teacher Lu actually climbed out of the pit on her own. Being able to stand up under his concentrated version of the Great Gravitation spell gave Wang Ling a clearer understanding of how powerful the Su Ling was. Wang Ling forgot about his own palms. The fighting strength of the hollow spirit attached to Teacher Lu's body was roughly the unit of 2 palms. However, he could not do it directly, because the body was still Mr. Lu's. He had to find a way to force the ethereal out of Mr. Lu's body. The Grand Purification spell was ineffective, because the ethereals were not evil spirits, ghosts or viruses. They were complete high-level creatures, and the power of the Grand Purification spell could not work on Mr. Lu's body. In this situation, he could only think of another way. He looked up at the sky. The meteorite that had fallen due to the Great Gravity spell was now moving toward him at high speed. On the other side was Mr. Lu, who had gone mad after being possessed by the ethereal spirit. On one side was a falling meteorite. This situation was undoubtedly disastrous for Wang Ling. With so many eyes on him, he couldn't directly take action, and could only resolve this sudden crisis in secret. In the gymnasium, under the effect of the Great Gravity spell, Teacher Lu struggled to get up from the ground. The condensed version of the spell could not completely restrict Teacher Lu's freedom, but if it was the complete version, it might cause a new meteorite crisis. Wang Ling sighed in his heart. In this situation, he had to force the ethereal spirit out of Teacher Lu's body and stop the meteorite from falling. In Wang Ling's view, there was only one best way. The next moment, Wang Ling turned his finger and strengthened Teacher Lu's bald head. Look, it's a golden legend. Someone at the scene exclaimed. More than one person saw the top of Teacher Lu's head glow. This was the effect of Wang Ling's strengthening. The bright light was as dazzling as the sun that had just risen on the horizon, and people couldn't help feeling that it was a little harsh. A lot of people couldn't help covering their eyes. They didn't know what on earth was going on, but this kind of light was really too harsh. Strengthening Teacher Lu's bald head was just the first step in Wang Ling's plan. Right now, Teacher Lu was probably already the toughest woman in the universe. The next step was for Wang Ling to personally control Teacher Lu to fight the meteorite. In the blink of an eye, Teacher Lu's entire body shot out of the gymnasium like a rocket launched straight into the sky. With her dazzling bald head, she charged unstoppably toward the huge meteorite that was trying to break through the atmosphere. The ethereal spirit attached to Teacher Lu's body realized that the body it was controlling wasn't listening to its commands at all, and it couldn't help swearing. Ethereals didn't normally swear, but they were very good at learning. The ethereal spirit in Teacher Lu's body had inadvertently learned this when Teacher Lu reprimanded the students on a daily basis. A few seconds before it hit the meteorite, the ethereal spirit felt fear in its heart. It didn't know that Wang Ling had already strengthened Teacher Lu's bald head, so it couldn't make an accurate judgment of the current situation. It had already been in Teacher Lu's body for a long time, and it could be said that it had already achieved a perfect fusion. Once Teacher Lu's body was injured, it would also suffer an equal amount of damage. It absolutely couldn't let that happen. It had to stay alive to complete the task given to it by the Lord of the Void. Thus, after an intense internal struggle, and seeing that it was about to hit the meteorite, the ethereal spirit attached to Teacher Lu's body finally clenched its teeth and gave up on Teacher Lu's body. In the next moment, there was a huge roar in the sky as the huge meteorite collided with Teacher Lu, who had been launched from the ground. Struck by the toughest woman in the universe, the meteorite was smashed to pieces in the atmosphere. Before the broken rocks could hit the ground, they were burned to ashes. Wang Ling controlled Teacher Lu to land safely, while his primordial spirit left his body to capture the ethereal spirit that had just broken free from Teacher Lu's body. The ethereal spirit had luckily escaped, and was looking for a new host. At that moment, it saw Wang Ling with his primordial spirit, a very strong person. The ethereal spirit was instantly excited. To be able to leave the body with his primordial spirit at such a young age, his physical quality was definitely top-notch. This was trillions of times stronger than the female teacher it had attached to previously. "Kid, it's your bad luck to run into me," the ethereal spirit said excitedly, and without saying a word, it directly plunged into Wang Ling's primordial spirit. At the same time, Wang Ling swiftly withdrew his primordial spirit. His plan to use his primordial spirit as bait to capture the ethereal spirit had been a complete success. This ethereal spirit had run into him. Just his bad luck. Chapter 1243. After entering Wang Ling's body, the void spirit's first step was to take control of the brain, seize the spirit space, and then start to devour Wang Ling's will. Every human cultivator who was invaded by the arcane spirits would face this step. This was also one of the reasons why these human cultivators behaved so erratically, and their temperaments changed so much. The invasion officially began. An ordinary human spirit space couldn't be considered big. This was related to a person's cultivation level. For example, the female teacher surnamed Lu from before had a spirit space the size of a rented apartment, which in the void spirit's view was so small that he couldn't even stretch his legs. But the advantage was that it was easier for him to control a small spirit space. As long as it wasn't ridiculously big, it was generally fine. Cultivators on Earth weren't ridiculously big. A true immortal spirit space was only the size of 10 football fields. Full of confidence, the void spirit snuck into Wang Ling's spirit space. Then he was completely stupefied by the scene in front of him. Because the spirit space he saw was a sea of stars. The sky was full of stars and countless planets orbited here. They reflected each other's beauty and radiated dazzling brilliance, and the void spirit couldn't see the end of it. This was the universe? The void spirit was instantly scared out of his wits. How could a normal human cultivator's spirit space contain the entire universe? Wasn't this even more outrageous than their great supreme lord of the void? No, he had to get out of here as soon as possible. The void spirit realized that something wasn't right. He couldn't stay in this human youngster's body any longer, and had to return to the void as soon as possible to report this matter to the Lord of the Void. No one could have expected that a planet as harmless as Earth would actually hide such a cosmic-level monster. But at that moment, it was already too late. Because choosing to enter Wang Ling's body had been a mistake from the beginning. The void spirit thought that he could still escape, but the truth was that he had been locked in a human cage. Wang Ling's body was like the iron wall of a cage, firmly locking him inside. "You can't escape." At that moment, a cold and indifferent voice rang out in the universe. It didn't know where it came from, but it seemed to be the voice of the universe itself, affecting the pulse of the universe, and the void spirit felt a great pressure when it spoke. A white-haired youth that was condensed from countless particles of light appeared here. "You're not him. Who the hell are you?" Su Ling looked at the young man in front of him nervously. Although this young man looked exactly the same as the owner of the body outside, Su Ling could still tell that they were not the same person. "I am his shadow." Wang Ying opened her eyes and replied indifferently. "You think you can destroy me?" Su Ling ignored it. "Even if you have the ability to trap me here, you may not be able to kill me. You lowly creatures. They don't know the meaning of life." Su Ling smiled. He had no physical body. Like light and wind, It was very difficult to capture, and even more impossible to kill. Only spells can defeat spells. I'm sorry to tell you that I don't have a physical body either. Wang Ying smiled. The next moment, his body quickly disintegrated under Su Ling's nose. In the blink of an eye, the black shadow pressed down, and the dazzling stars were shrouded by the endless shadow. Wang Ying disintegrated his body, forming a large-scale shadow howl that covered the sky and the earth, as if it wanted to swallow the whole universe together. The sight in front of Su Ling's eyes quickly dimmed. In a very short time, he had been swallowed by the endless black shadow. He felt as if he had fallen into a black hole. However, he was not afraid. He just felt that Wang Ying's actions were meaningless. 596 so what? Su Ling laughed. The next moment Wang Ying said, "Nothing, but this way, I can kill you." He dispelled the shadow howl and looked at Su Ling, who had been coated by his black shadow. Su Ling did not have a physical body, but at this moment, after being coated by Wang Ying, everything was different. The high-level life form that they were proud of was painted with the black shadow at this moment. At that moment, Wang Ying could easily see Su Ling's true appearance. They were like silk ribbons that could extend infinitely and float in the air, giving off the feeling of the Dove chocolate commercial back then. It was only then that Su Ling realized that his noble body had been defiled, and he started to get angry. He was like an angry cat, and even the shape of his body undulated like sound waves. "What did you do to my body?" he roared as he charged at Wang Ying. Wang Ying didn't care about a mere combat strength of 2 hands. Apart from the fact that he didn't have the king's eye, his battle strength was almost the same as Wang Ling's. The Su Ling in front of him could be easily dealt with just 2 slaps, but Wang Ying couldn't really kill him. His purpose in coating him was actually to warn the Su Ling in front of him. As long as you fell into this man's body, it didn't matter what stage you were in your life form. You could still be killed and destroyed. Facing Su Ling's attack, Wang Ying calmly raised his hand, and with 15% of his strength he accurately slapped the ribbon flying at him. The Su Ling immediately screamed in pain, and at the same time, a black substance sprayed out of his body. Wang Ying deduced that it was probably Su Ling's blood. Su Ling's blood was originally colorless, but after being coated by Wang Ying's shadow, even the blood was dyed black. "You're no longer a higher form of life. You already have color and form, and you can even be hit by me." Wang Ying looked at the Su Ling. He didn't look like he was looking at a higher form of life. It was the look of someone staring at trash. You should have already felt the fear of death from that slap just now. Even if you were to return to the Su Ling now, your lord would only think of you as an alien, and would mercilessly erase you. These 2 short sentences made the Su Ling feel even more terrified. He completely believed what Wang Ying said. Given his current ugly appearance, even if he went back, he would definitely be ostracized. "I'll give you a chance. Answer my question. After that, I'll remove the coating on your body and let you go," Wang Ying said to the Su Ling. This Su Ling was already at his wit's end. "What do you want to ask?" "Wang Ying, what on earth are you looking for when you invaded Earth?" The Su Ling fell silent. He was wondering what kind of question it was. Sooner or later, this matter would have to come out in the open. As long as it didn't involve the Lord of the Void, he could answer it. "We're looking for the key to the Void Gate. Only the great son of the Void is qualified to be this key," the Su Ling said. "Can't you open the gate? Why do you need a key?" Wang Ying was puzzled. The Su Ling. "We agreed that you would only ask 1 question." "Sorry, it's my fault." Wang Ying apologized. The next moment he raised his hand. "Then you can go die." After saying that, Wang Ying's palm struck out, 200% power. The huge palm force shook the universe. Chapter 1244. You're pretty ruthless. Wang Ling's voice reverberated in the spiritual space, which was as vast as the universe. "I won't allow anyone to defile this place." Wang Ying's voice was cold. He turned around and his whole body turned into a black shadow, once again merging with Wang Ling's spiritual space. He was decisive in killing. Wang Ling admitted that he was far inferior to Wang Ying in terms of character. Although Wang Ying was his shadow, his personality was very different from his. Wang Ling named the slap Wang Ying had used on the void spirit just now. No one recognizes me. He felt that this was very much in line with Wang Ying's personality. If it had been Wang Ling, he probably wouldn't have killed this void spirit. Because Wang Ling wouldn't care about a small bug, the blockade of the spiritual space actually gave Wang Ling a very good opportunity to play with this bug he had just caught. But unfortunately, the situation was urgent, and Wang Ling didn't have much time. Although Wang Ying had killed this void spirit, at least Wang Ling had learned why they wanted to invade Earth. To find the key. Wang Ling rubbed his chin as he carefully pondered what this void spirit had said. No one had ever truly opened the void gate, and since ancient times, anyone who crossed it would undoubtedly die. Master Li Shaokai and Li Huanran had even paid the price with their lives. If he put the whole incident together, Wang Ling felt that there might be a possibility. That was, the void spirits might have long had designs on Earth, but unfortunately, they couldn't open the void gate themselves. Back then, Master Li Shaokai had broken the void gate by force and inadvertently opened a crack, which in fact was a signal for the void spirits to invade. Some of them had come out of the crack. Unfortunately, it was far from enough to achieve their goal of invading Earth with just a small portion of the arcane church. Therefore, the void spirits had to find the so-called Son of the Void, and use him as the key to completely open the void gate. This was just Wang Ling's conjecture. But generally speaking, Wang Ling thought it was reasonable. He typed this conjecture into text and sent it to Audiobook. He would leave the rest to him to handle. This hollow spirit had called itself a high-level creature, but in the end, Wang Ying had destroyed it with 2 slaps. Wang Ling felt that the ruler behind this hollow spirit might not be that strong. Teacher Lu's incident caused a lot of chaos in number 60 high. Fortunately, apart from Teacher Lu, no one else in number 60 high who had been invaded by Mai Su Ling had been found. When Headmaster Chen arrived, Teacher Lu was already under the control of the epidemic prevention personnel. He wanted to go up and check on Teacher Lu's condition, but he was stopped by an epidemic prevention worker. Headmaster Chen, it's best if you don't look. You don't have much hair to begin with. If it gets stained, it'll be terrible. Why did he suddenly go berserk? Headmaster Chen couldn't understand. Other places have similar reactions, but it's not as serious as Teacher Lu's. It is said that the virus and reagents have an intensified reaction, causing a certain degree of stimulation to the human body. It depends on each person's degree of acceptance, the staff said. How many cases have been diagnosed? Headmaster Chen asked with concern. The anti-epidemic worker replied telepathically. Currently, there are more than 1,200 confirmed cases in Songhai City, and 3,678 suspected cases. Fortunately, it doesn't seem to be as serious in other places. It's only in our city. Wang Ling had intercepted this telepathic spell. On the way back to class, Wang Ling had a new idea. Judging from the report from the epidemic prevention personnel just now, the number of ethereal invaders on Earth was still very limited, and the vast majority of them were gathered in Songhai City. Then, did this mean that the ethereal side had already locked onto the approximate location of the Son of the Void? This legendary Son of the Void. Perhaps he was within Songhai City, as expected of Shifu. Audiobook very quickly received Wang Ling's message. He praised Wang Ling for the clarity of his deduction, but it still needed evidence to support it. Those who had been detected had already been quarantined at the first possible moment. The incident with Teacher Lu served as a great warning to Audiobook. Immortal Jin Yuan and Crispy Noodles Dao Monarch had worked together to draw up a sealing talisman. The moment someone was detected, they would immediately seal them. Then they would be directly sent into a space isolation cage that they had set up, directly preventing the ethereal from trying to jump out of their bodies to find a new host. The situation seemed to be under control. But Audiobook was well aware that this battle had in fact only just begun. If they couldn't find the Son of the Void first, and the ethereal found him first, then once the void gate opened, it would be a huge disaster for the entire Earth. Although they had already found more than 1,200 cases, this definitely wasn't all of them. They were very good learners, and after the first wave of trouble, they would definitely be on guard and wouldn't be so easily deceived again. Do you have anything to say about the Son of the Void? On the car heading towards the frontline epidemic prevention station, Ajwa asked Kion. In fact, I wasn't the only investigator who was sent to investigate this matter, but now it looks like I might be the only one who survived. The Foundation must have already found some clues. Unless we can directly find someone from the Foundation, organizing a search for the Son of the Void is like looking for a needle in a haystack, said Kion. As he spoke, he glanced at Ajwa's phone out of the corner of his eye several times. He marveled at the intelligence of the person who had texted Ajwa, who had caught a ethereal with their bare hands, and even asked about the true purpose of the Void invasion. To Kion, this was simply inconceivable. Who on earth was this person? He was too strong. It looks like this matter is becoming more and more troublesome. Furthermore, we've already run into trouble. As Ajwa drove, he looked in the rearview mirror. Behind their Wuling Hongguang van, there was a black car following them closely. Immortal Jinyuan and Crispy Noodles Dao Monarch were currently on the front line to assist in suppressing the ethereals, so Ajwa and Kion were the only ones in the car. The other side is very strong. In the front passenger seat, Kion sensed the situation from a distance. He didn't think they would be able to handle the situation in front of them with just his and Ajwa's battle strength. According to Kion's judgment, the person sitting in the black car was undoubtedly the street sweeper. It's them. They're here to avenge Snake. As soon as he said this, Ajwa saw a black shadow suddenly jump out of the sunroof in the rearview mirror. The other party's jumping ability was astonishing, and it directly leaped over their van. Then, it stuck out its neck and half lay on the windshield, hanging its head upside down as it looked at them. What terrified Kion the most was, this person clearly wasn't Snake. Instead, it gave off the same scent as Snake. Chapter 1245. With deep dark circles and sunken eye sockets, coupled with his dangling red hair, Snake lay on the windshield like a ghost. The next moment, he stretched out his hand and his sharp nails directly pierced through the windshield. The entire side of the reinforced glass shattered in a split second, turning into glass shards that drifted into the air. Then they turned into particles of light and swiftly disappeared. Ajwa and Kion reacted quickly. Almost at the same time that Snake launched his attack, the two of them swiftly unbuckled their seatbelts, opened the car doors, and leapt out on their spirit swords. Who on earth is this person? Ajwa stared at the young man in front of him, his eye-catching fiery red hair falling to his waist. He was bare-chested, revealing his huge muscles and the perfect lines of his muscles. It's Snake, yes, but this body definitely isn't his. Kion frowned. The aura of this resurrected Snake was many times stronger than the one Kion had known. Countless cultivators nearby were alarmed by the scene of a fierce fight on the overpass. Many abandoned their vehicles and flew away on their swords, while some passers-by also chose to call the police. Choosing to evacuate at a time like this was definitely a wise move, but in Ajwa's view, there wasn't much point in calling the police. Snake's aura was already different. Even if the cultivation police sent someone over, they wouldn't be his match. Kion, have you heard of the Void? At that moment, Snake was standing on the roof of a car. He gazed at Kion, enjoying the feeling immensely. Bang! A gunshot rang out in the distance. A sniper rifle bullet formed from powerful spirit power swiftly pierced through the air, and was aimed at Snake's head. Someone from the police has arrived? Ajwa was startled. He hadn't expected the nearby area to react so quickly. In the face of the speeding sniper rifle bullet, Snake stood motionless. In fact, his gaze had long since come into contact with the trajectory of the sniper rifle. Spirit power bullet? Do you think you can hurt me? Snake sneered. The bullet accurately hit the spot between his eyebrows, and like a clay ox disappearing into the sea, it was swallowed into Snake's body. Devour the Void. This was a new ability he had gained after becoming a higher life form. As long as he willed it, everything that wanted to pass through his body, including spells, hidden weapons, and all kinds of flying objects, would be devoured by him and completely disintegrated. Snake could never forget the scene of him being pierced in the head by a needle when he became a human. And now, he had become a hollow spirit. These flashy feints were already meaningless to him. He has become an ethereal. Kun quickly realized what was happening. As an investigator, he had secretly made contact with the ethereals, and even though he wasn't 100% sure, he was convinced that Snake was no longer human. What's so good about being human? Keon, you will never understand the thrill of transcending the limits of life. Snake sneered. You know, it really feels good not to be human. Perhaps this is the ultimate evolution of life form. As soon as he said that, Snake rose high into the air and looked down at Audiobook and Keon as if they were two ants. In a very short period of time, it was as if time had come to a standstill, and even the air had stagnated. An astonishing pressure erupted from Snake's body. With a deafening sound, the viaduct instantly broke, and one car after another sank into the soil like sand in a mudslide. Is this the power of a hollow spirit? Both Audiobook and Keon were under tremendous pressure. If it wasn't for the long johns he was wearing, Audiobook felt that he wouldn't be able to withstand this power at all. This pressure was different from spiritual pressure, but it was even more frightening than the spiritual pressure of an earth cultivator. For a brief moment, Audiobook even felt like he was losing his mind. It's no use, a golden core cultivator. A false true immortal. He's no match for me. Snake was full of confidence. He stood high up in the sky, and his arrogant eyes were filled with disdain. It was as if he were playing with two ants. Fortunately, at the critical moment, Audiobook swiftly activated the 33-path primordial chi. This was the technique Wang Ling had bestowed upon him in Chapter 679. Audiobook had been painstakingly cultivating every day, constantly using the 33-path primordial chi to accumulate spirit power, and it finally came in handy at this moment. A technique to accumulate psionic powers? Snake smiled. It wasn't like he hadn't seen this kind of technique before, but it was usually stored up and released at a critical moment to gamble with one's life. After releasing all of it, one's realm would advance by leaps and bounds for a short period of time. But Audiobook was only at the golden core stage, and there was a huge gap between them to begin with. So what if he released all of it? Snake looked at Audiobook contemptuously, wanting to see what on earth he was up to. Open the floodgates. With Audiobook's explosive shout, his aura began to surge. The spirit power that he had normally accumulated in his golden core was now gushing out like a tide. Until this moment, Keon frowned as he sensed that something wasn't right. A heavenly Tao technique? He started to be astonished by Audiobook's 33-path primordial chi. An ordinary technique to store spirit power could only store dreams of one realm at most, which meant that after Audiobook released his power, he could at most grow to the nascent soul stage's battle strength. But the 33-path primordial chi in Audiobook's body could store up to 33 realms of spirit power. That was to say, Audiobook's body contained the spirit power of 33 giant reservoirs. Of course, given Audiobook's daily savings and Wang Ling's occasional pointers, his reservoir of spirit power had long since reached saturation. Audiobook had never found a suitable opportunity to use it. And now, the time was completely ripe. You, a golden core cultivator, actually have a heavenly Tao technique? Snake looked at Audiobook in astonishment. When he had still been human, he had also painstakingly pursued heavenly Tao, but he hadn't even touched the hem of its robe. He had once been a cultivator from Earth who had worked hard to cultivate in pursuit of the power of heavenly Tao. Snake laughed self-deprecatingly in his heart. For him, it was no longer important whether or not he had heavenly Tao. He had already become a higher life form. Even if it was heavenly Tao, he didn't care about it at all. Audiobook, you've given me a good chance to prove myself. Snake fixed his gaze on Audiobook with a fierce expression. I will kill you with my own hands and hang your head high above the gate of the void, to prove that I am already above the heavenly Tao. Chapter 1246. Snake and Cohen couldn't be said to be familiar with each other. But as a colleague who had worked together in the same unit, and in addition, Cleon had secretly investigated Snake's information, he felt that Snake had become a completely different person after transforming into a void spirit. Snake had become even more arrogant, and could even be said to have become more conceited. After completely becoming a void spirit, even his personality has changed. This could be considered a new discovery for Cohen, and he believed that there were two types of personality changes. The first was an earth cultivator who had been invaded by a void spirit. After merging with a void spirit, under the premise that their mental space was controlled, even their personality would be taken over by the void spirit. There didn't seem to be any abnormalities in their behavior, but it was still quite different from usual. Number 60 High School's teacher Lu was the best example. The second type was Snake, who was in front of him. He hadn't been invaded by a void spirit, but had accepted it of his own accord, allowing his soul to completely change and become a void spirit himself. Cohen had been investigating the void all this time, and had even made some silent contact with them. But this was indeed his first time exchanging blows with a void spirit. Standing here as a false true immortal, he could already feel immense pressure, let alone Audiobook. Mr. Zhua, what are our chances of winning? He instinctively wanted to persuade Audiobook to retreat. Judging from the astonishing pressure that Snake was exerting, even if Audiobook, who was at the golden core stage, was added to the mix, it didn't seem like they would be able to completely reverse the situation. But at that moment Audiobook shouted, "Open the floodgates." Hearing this, Cohen was shaken to the core. Mr. Zhua. He turned around in disbelief and stared in astonishment at Audiobook's live performance. The power of heavenly Tao. At this point, Cohen was completely stupefied. The expression on his face was exactly the same as Snake's when he saw this scene. A golden core stage cultivator actually possessed a heaven's path cultivation technique. This was simply unimaginable. This war sex people were simply abnormal. Was this still a sect made up of people? At that moment, Cohen's emotions were exceptionally complicated. Excitement, astonishment, doubt, all kinds of emotions were intertwined. He had long since known that Audiobook wasn't a simple person. But now his impression of Audiobook in his heart needed a major update. A tremendous amount of spirit power gushed out of the tiny golden core in Audiobook's body like a landslide, a tsunami, or a flood breaching a dam. In a short period of time, Audiobook's aura skyrocketed. Of the 33 giant reservoirs of spirit power, Audiobook had only unsealed 6 of them, but he had already achieved astonishing results. The reservoir was good, but it couldn't be completely released at once. At the moment, Audiobook was already at his limit for releasing 6 people in a single round. He needed to wait for his body to adapt before he could proceed with the next round of unsealing. Unlocking the seals of the 6 reservoirs would increase his cultivation level to the false true immortal stage. His current battle prowess wasn't any weaker than Calhoun's. However, it would be a little difficult for the two of them to defeat Snake together. Miss Bai Qiao, if I die, no one will test the game for you in the future. At that moment, Audiobook roared into the air. If we don't act now, when will we? As soon as he finished speaking, on the horizon, a beam of brown light lit up and shot straight into the sky. He then swiftly turned into a shooting star and sped towards Audiobook. The scabbard of the peachwood sword. To better protect Audiobook, Wang Ling had added Audiobook's name to the scabbard. But Audiobook hadn't dared order it around. If it wasn't for the critical situation at the moment, he absolutely wouldn't have dared disturb this female otaku playing games in the sect. It had to be said that Bai Qiao reacted very quickly. After hearing Audiobook's summon, she almost immediately pressed the pause button on the game and flew into Audiobook's palm at a speed faster than the speed of light. The scabbard of the peachwood sword? Snake laughed again. He had never seen anyone whose weapon of choice was actually a scabbard, and one made of peach wood at that. He felt that he could turn a scabbard like this into flying ash with a single breath. Snake had thought that Audiobook would take out something amazing, but he was greatly disappointed in the end. Audiobook, it seems your performance is over. It's my turn now. In the air, Snake spread his arms, and Audiobook could see an invisible mass of energy seemingly gathering in his palms. This was a super dense mass of energy. The moment Snake condensed it, the energy was extremely dense. The space nearby couldn't bear the pressure and started to tear apart. This was a variation of the void devouring skill. Anyone who came into contact with this mass of energy would instantly disappear, devoured by the void. So in Snake's view, no matter what Audiobook took out, it would be of no use. What was more, what he had just summoned was a scabbard that looked absolutely useless. Audiobook, Crawl for me. Snake laughed out loud. The next moment, he pushed out with both hands, and actually took the initiative to stuff the void energy mass into the space fissure. Before Audiobook could react, in the blink of an eye, two energy masses surrounded him from both sides, trapping him in the middle. This was Snake's ability to use the energy mass's ability to devour space to achieve this instantaneous effect. Oh no! On the side, Kun's expression changed dramatically. No matter how fast Audiobook reacted, there was no way he could stop this kind of encirclement. In a moment of desperation, Kun sent out a wave of spirit power from his hand. He wanted to send Audiobook flying, in order to break free from the encirclement of the energy masses. But Snake's target wasn't just Audiobook. Kun, crawl for me too. He sneered and used the same trick. Another two balls of void energy that could devour everything locked onto Cleon's position. In Snake's view, this was already a sure win. His mission was actually to kill Kun. Audiobook was just a buy one get one free bonus. He was an important figure in Battle Sect. By killing Audiobook, he could prove that he was above the heavenly Tao. And in doing so, he could challenge the entire Battle Sect. He could wipe away the humiliation of being stabbed to death by a flying needle in front of Battle Sect's mountain gate. But in the next moment, something unexpected happened. Just as the two void energy masses were about to collide, Audiobook and Kun's positions suddenly shifted backward. And in the blink of an eye, shifted several coordinates. When the void energy masses collided, there was a loud explosion, and two huge wormholes appeared. Audiobook heaved a slight sigh of relief. At long last, he had dodged this calamity. Ever since he had noticed Snake's ability to devour space, Audiobook had been on high alert. So the instant Snake condensed the energy mass, at the same time, Audiobook was ready. He used Bai Qiao to cut off a section of space to achieve the effect of teleportation. Now it was time for him to counterattack. Audiobook took a deep breath. In the air, he swiftly assumed the posture of throwing a javelin, and abruptly threw Bai Qiao out of his hand. This was an attack aimed directly between Snake's eyebrows. Audiobook, there's no way I'm going to fall in the same place. In the face of this attack, Snake appeared very confident, and couldn't stop laughing wildly. His body had changed with this attack, and anything that got close to him would be devoured clean by the void. He even took the initiative to stick his head out to meet Bai Qiao's attack. He was going to devour the entire scabbard. Then, in the next moment, there was a splat. There was a sound. Bai Qiao turned into a stream of brown light and pierced Snake's head again. Chapter 1247. It was a familiar scene and the same way he died. Snake's eyes widened in disbelief at what was happening in front of him. Impossible. I am a great citizen of the void. Before he died, Snake used the last of his strength to say his last words. Then there was a huge explosion in the sky. The nearby space was destroyed along with it, forming a massive wormhole. This was an explosion that occurred after a hollow died, and it was extremely powerful. Any cultivator from Earth below the level of true immortal would undoubtedly die in the aftermath. Looking at this, Audiobook and Keon trembled. This was yet another discovery about the hollow. Without a physical body, a pure hollow wouldn't explode after death. But if an Earth cultivator who had been invaded by a hollow died along with it, it would cause an explosion similar to a backlash from the void. So if they wanted to kill a hollow, the safest way was to force the hollow out of the human body, and then think of a way to kill it. Audiobook felt that it was necessary to report this to the front line. If the Arcane Church decided to give up, the cultivators on Earth who had already been invaded would be natural time bombs. Mr. Keon, do you have any impression of the person Snake is occupying? Audiobook took out the notebook in his suit jacket. Using the impression projection spell, he projected Snake's changed appearance onto the notebook. Audiobook was already very familiar with this impression projection spell. A person with a rich imagination could even use this technique to create a comic, and it wouldn't be a dream at all. He could go wherever he wanted to go. I never thought Snake would actually give up his human identity and become a hollow. Keon sighed endlessly. Staring at Audiobook's portrait, he made a simple deduction about Snake's situation. After his first death, he must have used some method to become a hollow. Then he invaded this man's body. This man. I seem to have seen him somewhere before, but I'm not too familiar with him. Could he be someone from your foundation? I know most of my colleagues in the foundation, but I've never seen this person. Keon shook his head. Unless what? Unless he's one of the 7 great envoys behind the scenes of the foundation. One of the 7 great envoys. Audrey mused. Indeed, the possibility of this inference could not be ruled out. Even putting aside the fact that Snake had become a phantom, Audrey and Keon had to admit that the owner of this body that Snake had found was very strong. This could be seen from the quality of his physical body. Snake was not a random target to invade. There must be a mastermind behind all of this. At this moment, the blasted wormhole in the sky was gradually shrinking. Spatial cracks have a self-repairing mechanism, but this repair is very slow. For a wormhole like this, it would take at least a day for it to completely recover. Audrey saw that the police officers in the nearby area had already arrived on spirit swords and were holding immortal leftovers. They needed to set up a cordon here and temporarily seal off the airspace in this area. Director Zhua, a team leader of the cultivation police officers, approached Audrey and bowed respectfully in front of him. I'm in such a disguise, you can still recognize me? Audrey was astonished. The main thing is that the criminal who self-destructed just now screamed very loudly. Hearing this, Audrey smiled. I'm already wanted by the Straits Alliance. Aren't you going to arrest me? I wouldn't dare. The team leader shook his head. From the beginning, I felt that there was some misunderstanding, or perhaps it was a setup. Director Zhua has made outstanding contributions. How could he have killed Warden Liang? Audrey secretly breathed a sigh of relief at this team leader's words. He felt very lucky to have run into a reasonable person. If he had run into some sort of iron blockhead, there would have been no way to clean up this matter. I still need to go to the front line, so I'll have to trouble you to keep my matter a secret, brother. Audrey patted this team leader on the shoulder. Oh, that's right, brother. What's your name? My name is Lu Liang. The team leader with the surname Lu saluted again. Audrey nodded and cupped his fists together with Keon. Then I wish Captain Lu good luck. Good luck. Captain Lu saluted back. Because his appearance had already been exposed, Audrey changed his appearance again before he left. This time, he was even uglier than Kushuan's previous appearance. As he left, the team leader called Lu Liang called out to Audrey again. Director Zhua, we found this. We don't know if it's something that Director Zhua abandoned. Lu Liang handed over the item. It was a round pearl the size of a palm that gave off a brilliant light. Audrey sniffed it, and was surprised that it actually had Snake's scent on it. This might be the key to why Snake was able to become a hollow spirit. Keon narrowed his eyes and spoke to Audrey telepathically. Taking the pearl, Audrey once again thanked this attentive Captain Lu. Then he and Keon turned into 2 long rainbows and disappeared into the sky. Gazing at Audrey's disappearing figure, Lu Liang waved excitedly in farewell. He had been an Audrey fan for a long time. Meeting his idol made him feel as if he had instantly become the happiest person in the world. Captain Lu, the area has basically been cordoned off. Now we're going to tally the casualties. I'll handle this part. Lu Liang nodded and said. He felt that it was better to do some things himself. Many of the police officers in their area were Audrey's fans, who knew what kind of outrageous things these people would do to protect Audrey. But he was different. He was a rational fan. It would be a little too fake if he completely covered up the matter. Lu Liang had already thought of a very good way to cover for Audrey, while also handling this matter seamlessly. Nowadays, even if you wanted to protect your idol, you had to be careful. Otherwise, it might attract even more trouble. It should be noted that it was not uncommon for fans to act like idols on the internet. Director Zhua, watch me. Lu Liang looked in the direction Audrey had left, full of confidence in himself. Elsewhere, on his way to the epidemic prevention station, Audrey received news from BattleSec's intelligence department. The result was just as Keon had expected. It's just as you thought. Audrey frowned. Who on earth is this person? The president of Mishio Nation's Apollo Charity Association, Apollo Deliman. And this person's true identity is the Sun emissary of the Foundation's 7 major ambassadors. It's actually him. Now Keon finally recalled the identity of this person. He sighed. Apollo Deliman. This is a man with a strong sense of justice. The charity association he established spends a lot of money every year to help people in distress. He's indeed like the sun, radiating his own light and heat. In Keon's opinion, Deliman was a very low-key person who contributed silently, but rarely appeared in the news. Thus, Keon had always been very vague about Deliman's face, but he was especially familiar with this name. Deliman was one of his idols. He marveled at Deliman's character. It was also Deliman who had told him. Chapter 1248. In the independent mental space of the Foundation. This time, the 7 emissaries were not all present. Only 5 of them were present. The sun's emissary is dead. The fool has betrayed us, Subai, who was sitting in the seat of judgment, said. The former was an unshakable fact, while Subai had yet to find clear evidence for the latter. However, he felt that the emissary's behavior was a little strange. Therefore, to be on the safe side, he actively kicked the fool's emissary out of the group chat. Who is he? Moon was curious. No one knew each other's identity. Now that the sun's emissary was dead, the focus was not on how or why he died. Instead, they were more concerned about his true identity. That sounded a little ironic. Subai sneered inwardly. Humans were indeed creatures filled with curiosity and arrogance. However, it was indeed harmless to reveal his identity now. He was not in a hurry to speak. Instead, he looked in the direction of the star emissary and asked, Star, you have the ability of prophecy. Do you still not know Sun's identity? Star was silent. He or she pondered for dozens of seconds before speaking. I observed the sky at night and saw stars falling, so I knew that the sun's emissary was in danger. But I don't know his true identity. At this point, Subai raised an eyebrow meaningfully. He did not hide it anymore. Subai. The sun's emissary's true identity is Apollo Deliman. Everyone, it's him. It was the same reaction as Kun when he heard the name. In the mental space, everyone except Subai was more or less surprised. Moon observed a moment of silence for the emissary. She made a praying gesture. He's a good man. We all know he's a good man, Tank said. To everyone's surprise, he changed his irritable attitude from before. Instead, he spoke in an uncharacteristically gentle tone. Although I don't agree with him, everyone can see what he and his people have done. We should avenge Sun. So now we need to know who killed him. At this moment, Subai, who was sitting in the seat of judgment, knew that the meeting had finally reached its climax. He did not hesitate to announce the man who killed Sunday. With a light turn of the magic ball, a man's holographic projection immediately appeared in front of everyone. You all know this person, right? Subai's voice was calm. He and Tank had worked together to stir up the emotions of the others. It's him. Ajwa. Tank angrily pounded the table. In fact, he already knew the answer last night. But as an outstanding actor, Tank had dedicated his entire life's worth of acting skills. It could be said that his performance was thorough, meticulous, and incisive. The manic Tank's behavior surprised everyone. They never expected him to have such a gentle side to him. Deliman has always been passionate about charity. He devoted his life's efforts to helping those suffering. Tank's voice sounded a little choked up. This was a technique that he had spent the whole night honing. Anyway, in this spiritual space, everyone was a mass of black shadows, and their expressions could not be seen clearly. Therefore, he only needed to concentrate on the shaping of his voice. When Subai heard War Chariot sobbing, he sighed inwardly. He felt that Tank had the potential to become the champion of his voice in the arena. Everyone, we must do something for the sun. We can't let the corpse of this great philanthropist be left out in the cold forever in a foreign country. Tank stood up excitedly. Kill Ajwa. Avenge the sun. The moon emissary had always been very gentle, but she was easily swayed by her emotions. As a nun sent to the mortal world by God, she probably shouldn't have such a strong desire for revenge. But now, guided by Tank's emotions, she also felt pity for the dead Deliman. So very quickly, the moon emissary also expressed her opinion. This devil must be punished. God will definitely give him the punishment he deserves. Her words were very subtle. But the truth was that she was already on Tank's side. The general trend was set. This meeting was a war of condemnation for Deliman, the sun emissary. The perfect teamwork between Su Bai and Tank evoked the emotions of almost everyone present. This was also the first time that everyone had spoken in unison. Then, as everyone has voted, this foundation meeting has voted to crusade against Audiobook. Unanimous. Su Bai, who had the overall situation under his control, dropped his gavel from his seat. Everything was going according to his plan, including Snake's plan to invade the body of the sun emissary after becoming a phantom, including Snake's plan to seek revenge on Audiobook, and Kiorn after fusing perfectly with the body. Of course, there was also Snake's death in battle and Audiobook picking up the void magic ball. All of this was within Su Bai's expectations. Now, there's only one step left before we start preparing for war. In the ancient castle, Su Bai tasted the red medicine soup. He wanted to borrow the hands of the other people in the foundation to kill Audiobook. After obtaining the void magic ball, Audiobook would become a phantom. At the Epidemic Prevention Center station in the western suburbs of Songhai City, like an eggshell, an enormous barrier perfectly formed an impenetrable defense line. There was only one entrance and exit to the barrier, and everyone who went in and out had to be tested. Inside the barrier was a temporary isolation hospital created using the star-shifting spell and the construction spell. It could accommodate tens of thousands of people. All the wards were independent spaces that Crispy Noodles Dao Monarch and Immortal Jin Yuan had worked together to open up. As soon as Audiobook and Kiorn entered the command center after being tested, Silian Junren, who had been waiting outside the building for a long time, quickly approached them. This is bad. Silian Junren's expression was a little unsightly. Tell me what happened. Audiobook took Silian Junren to a secret place. I just received news that Senior Immortal has been detained by the main alliance, Silian Junren said. Audiobook frowned slightly at this news. Currently, Battle Sect was on the same side as Huaguo Water Curtain Group, and was completely on the head of state's side. So it was certain that the people who had detained grenade-throwing Senior Immortal were the second force in the main alliance. Senior Immortal won't fall for it so easily. Maybe he's thinking of a way to lure out the mastermind behind this second force. Audiobook's thoughts raced as he felt that there was something fishy behind this. Senior Immortal is right. There's no need to worry for the time being. I have something that I need Senior Immortal Toya to appraise. Saying this, Audiobook took out the magic ball that Captain Lu Liang had picked up earlier. What's this? Silian Junren was curious. An equipment dropped after killing a phantom. Chapter 1249. In the name of testing for the bald head virus, they were in fact investigating the void creatures lurking among earth cultivators in Huaxiao Nation. Under Audiobook and Sun Yuan's arrangements, the operation was carried out in an orderly manner. The first front line of epidemic prevention was set up all over the country, and Songhai City currently had the highest concentration of void spirits. Wang Ling saw that the number of confirmed cases was still rising. In the afternoon, there had clearly been just over 1,200 cases, but in the evening, there was already an extra zero. On the internet, people were panicking over the new bald head virus. Wang Ling glanced at the class group and saw that Super Chin, Hirogua and a few others were openly discussing this matter. There weren't any teachers in this group, and it was a group set up by the students in class. I heard that we'll be attending classes at school tomorrow. I wonder if it's true. Don't be happy too early. Classes are suspended, but school isn't suspended. Old Pan will definitely give us a lot of homework. It's better if teacher stays at home now. Masks are already out of stock. You can't even buy them. There are also some people who are secretly raising the price. Shameless. It's fine if it's 1 or 2 yuan more expensive, but it's too outrageous. There were bound to be complaints. After all, the emergence of the bald virus had disrupted everyone's normal rhythm of life. It was indeed very comfortable for Wang Ling to stay at home. But this wasn't the peaceful life he wanted. So Wang Ling had already intervened. He hoped that this matter would pass as soon as possible. Based on the population of Songhai City, Book of Sage Immortal conservatively estimated that there were already no less than 100,000 void spirits lurking in Songhai City. The reason why these void spirits hiding in the dark had yet to riot was very simple. They were looking for a son of the void. Wang Ling didn't know what conditions one had to meet to become a son of the void. But right now, this was the source of all the void spirit stability. As long as a son of the void wasn't discovered, these void creatures wouldn't cause too much of a ruckus. Can you calculate a son of the void? Wang Ling gazed at the tablet on the table. So far, they had collected the data of 2 void creatures. One was the one Wang Ying had killed in Wang Ling's mental space. The other was the one Audiobook and Bai Qiao had killed together. Bai Qiao had already shared that memory with Jinka, so that Wang Ling could use Book of Sage Immortal to perform the data calculations. However, it was clear that the data of the 2 void creatures was still a bit too much for Book of Sage Immortal. My lord, I can only try my best. This is my first time learning about the creatures at the gate of the void, so I don't know much. Okay. Wang Ling wanted to laugh in his heart. To be honest, he rarely saw Book of Sage Immortal being defeated. Among all the spiritual monsters that he had enlightened, only this iPad felt that it was intelligent. It often thought itself to be smart, and even made decisions for him on its own. Thus, Wang Ling had long planned to send Book of Sage Immortal away. If it hadn't been for the invasion of the void this time, he would probably have sent it away by express delivery long ago. This time, the Book of Sage Immortal took a longer time to search. During this period, he also did a lot of other things. He did a set of 3-5 exercises. After he finished looking at the person he was chasing, he cast his monthly recommendation vote. He used the small amount of pocket money that Father Wang had embezzled to donate to a trustworthy charity. My lord, I've basically finished searching. Judging from the results of the search, the sons of the void that the hollow spirits are looking for are actually preparing for an invasion. There should be 2 real sons of the void. Both of them are the key to opening the gate of the void, and neither is missing. Book of Sage Immortal replied. What's the purpose of the invasion? Wang Ling asked telepathically. These hollow spirits thought they were superior to others, but wanted to invade Earth. To Wang Ling, this was unthinkable. There's a 37% chance that they want to occupy Earth. There's a 31% chance that they intend to transform Earth into a void farm to breed void creatures in batches for the hollow spirits to devour. There's a 23% chance that they want to use Earth as bait to disguise themselves as humans to lure other advanced creatures to attack Earth. They will then devour those advanced creatures in order to pursue a higher form of life. Judging from the memories of the 2 dead hollow spirits, the void creatures behind the gate believe that their current form isn't perfect, and that they can go one step further and evolve. There's a 9% chance that they want to attract the attention of the heavenly Tao. There's a less than 0.1% chance that they want to kill a certain short and mischievous author. Wang Ling, Book of Sage Immortal. But no matter what their purpose in invading is, opening the gate of the void is a crucial step that they must take. Because even the Lord of the Void doesn't have the ability to open the gate. No ability to open the gate? Lying on the ground, Loopy Toad laughed. Isn't the world behind the gate their home? Why would they dislike staying at home? Book of Sage Immortal. The world behind the gate is heaven for the hollow spirits, but after staying in heaven for too long, they'll always feel tired and want to go out in search of new stimulation. It's like the students who are stifled at home during the pandemic and look forward to the day they can start school. At home, they have to abide by the rules and regulations. Although they don't have to worry about food and clothing, they have to be careful every day. At the same time, they also have to be careful not to talk back to their elders. So going out is also a way for the hollow spirits to release themselves. This reason sounded a little real to Wang Ling. He felt that it was a portrayal of reality. Of course, everyone's thoughts were different. Some people might want to take a few more days off, while others wanted to return to school as soon as possible. But no matter what kind of thoughts they had, everyone's thoughts were the same. They hoped that this unexpected disaster would pass as soon as possible, so that everyone could live a safe and healthy life. Book of Sage Immortal. In summary, according to the information we've obtained so far, currently, there are 6 people who are most suitable to be chosen by the Arcane Church as children of the Void. The probability of these people being chosen is 50-50. I still need more samples from the Arcane Church to verify this. Then Book of Sage Immortal reported the following 4 names. Some of them were people he had heard of before. Gao Tianming, the captain of No. 1 Devil Subduing High School, when our Lord participated in the 9 Dragon Mountain National Body Technique Competition. Jiang Xiaoche, Huagua Water Curtain Group Sunny Yuan's personal secretary. Xiang Haitao, general manager of Songhai City's Xiang Family Waste Recycling Technology Company Limited, Xiang Haihua's eldest son, and has a long-term partnership with Sunny Yuan. Yi Jiang, a freshman from the Divine Sword Academy, and also the team leader of the 9 Dragon Mountain Tournament. Sword Saint Yi Jianchuan's adopted son. They're all men? Lupi Toad noticed a key point. Book of Sage Immortal. Based on the information I've compiled so far, there's a high probability that both children of the Void are men. But if we add in the probability of women, there's one person who is indeed more suspicious. Who is it? Wang Ling asked telepathically. Book of Sage Immortal. Huagua Water Curtain Group Sunny Yuan's eldest granddaughter, Lotus Sunday. Chapter 1250. Book of Sage Immortal's words actually reminded him of something. A so-called son of the Void might not necessarily be a man, and there was a certain probability that Lotus Sun was a son of the Void. After the 9 Dragon Mountain National Body Technique Exchange competition, Lotus Sun clearly hadn't been injured, but she was still heavily protected by the corporation. According to Old Antique, she would even take a break from school to recuperate for a period of time. Perhaps Old Man Sun had already sensed that there might be something wrong with her. But for now, this was just Wang Ling's speculation. After all, based on the current rankings, Lotus Sun had the lowest probability of being a child of the Void. Therefore, the most important thing now was to collect more ethereal samples, so that the Book of Sage Immortal's calculations would be more accurate. Wang Ling already had a premonition that the envoys of the Foundation, who had been keeping silent behind the scenes, would soon appear one after another. After entering the spiritual space the last time, he had left a wisp of divine intent on each of the Foundation's envoys. Sure enough, as Wang Ling had expected, Subai was already suspecting him. Therefore, in the latest meeting, the emissary of the Fool was eliminated. Their next step in their revenge was to target Audiobook. At that moment, he looked at the peachwood sword next to his pillow. Although Bai Qiao was already in Audiobook's hands, Wang Ling felt that it would be safer to also send Jinka to Audiobook just in case. Sword Master. Hearing the call in Wang Ling's heart, Jinka's sword trembled slightly. Without another word, Wang Ling looked straight in Audiobook's direction. Jinka understood, and then swiftly turned into a streak of brown light and rushed out of the window. After Jinka and Bai Qiao combined, they would become Jingbai. Wang Ling had already witnessed Jingbai's fighting strength. Even the 1,000-winged god could be killed with a single slash, let alone a mere ethereal. The truth was that Wang Ling had taken the initiative to give Jinka and Bai Qiao a chance to combine. The first time they fused, they had to adapt to each other so the fusion time wouldn't be too long. This needed to be polished over time. Now that this second opportunity was about to come, Wang Ling felt that Jinka and Bai Qiao's combination should last a little longer. A real man would only be able to last for 24 hours. As for Lotus Sun, Wang Ling felt that it wasn't appropriate for him to personally keep an eye on them at the moment. After all, Subai's ultimate target was still him. Between them, there was bound to be a battle of a slap. If he went to keep an eye on Lotus Sun, Subai would definitely be led there. At that time, everyone in the vicinity would suffer. At that moment, Wang Ling turned his gaze to Lupi Toad. Lupi Toad got up and yawned. Got it, I'll keep an eye on it. Lupi Toad had to help. The main reason was that he felt that Wang Ling had indeed been very tired recently. His little master still had to deal with exams and homework, and he also had to worry about the people and fight against the aliens over there. It was really not easy. Elsewhere, Songhai City's western suburbs' first epidemic prevention station command center. While Ajwa was waiting for Immortal Toya's test ball results, he also received the first list from Wang Ling. There were only 4 people on the list, because he had already sent Loopy Toad to keep an eye on Lotus Sunday. Thus, it would be better for Ajwa to be fully in charge of the remaining 4 people, and it would be better to deploy personnel to keep an eye on them. As expected of Shifu, he was actually able to determine the approximate range of the Sons of the Void so quickly. Looking at the list, Ajwa sighed in his heart. Gao Tianming Jiang Xiaoche Xiang Haitaui Jiang. Next to him, Kun recited the 4 names on the list with a deep frown. This Yi Jiang sounds a little familiar, as if I've heard of him somewhere before. This is the adopted son of Blademaster General Yi Jianchuan. How does Mr. Kun know him? Ajwa's words were actually a test for Qion. He had already learned from Wang Ling about the relationship between Yi Jiang and the War Throne ambassador behind the foundation, Toy Dre. Ajwa wanted to test whether Kun knew anything about this. Kun's brow furrowed tightly. I once inadvertently saw this name on a file submitted by a colleague. That's right. I can't be wrong. I remember that Toy Dre, the old CEO of a multinational spirit sword manufacturing group, once commissioned our foundation to investigate this person called Yi Jiang. Hearing this, Ajwa was stunned. He secretly marveled at the boldness of this War Throne ambassador. He was clearly a foundation's ambassador, but had taken the initiative to reveal his true identity, and instead commissioned the foundation to investigate his illegitimate son. What a good plan. Ajwa couldn't help laughing in his heart. The identities of the 7 ambassadors of the foundation were all confidential. By doing this, the War Throne ambassador could in fact play a confusing card to conceal his identity. But Toy Dre had clearly miscalculated. He would never have thought that almost everything that happened on this earth couldn't escape the eyes of his Shifu Wang Ling's enlightened iPad. I'm very happy that Mr. Kun isn't hiding anything from me, so I've also decided to tell Mr. Kun something. At that moment, Ajwa looked at Kun and said, actually, this Toy Dre is the War Throne ambassador behind the foundation. Kun was greatly alarmed by this news. The War Throne ambassador was actually Toy Dre? More than once, they had speculated that someone inside Huaxiao National Union might be secretly colluding with the foundation. If Toy Dre was the War Throne ambassador, and there was a connection between him and Yi Jiang, and Yi Jiang himself was General Yi's adopted son. Looking at all the evidence so far, General Yi's suspicions were very high. He's a blade master. Kun found it a little hard to believe. Even as an outsider, he felt that all this was inconceivable. I know. Ajwa nodded. This was a person who had once made great contributions to Huaxiao Nation. He had outstanding merits and was loyal, and there was almost no possibility that he would betray the Union. However, a large number of facts showed that General Yi was indeed very suspicious. We only follow the evidence and facts. At that moment, Ajwa sighed emotionally. I'm also a fan of His Excellency Blademaster. I don't believe he would do something like that. But Mr. Kun, have you ever thought that there might be another possibility? When Ajwa said this, Kun was suddenly enlightened, and his blue eyes widened in astonishment. You mean? I suspect that Blademaster might have already been invaded by the Void. Ajwa frowned deeply. This was the only reasonable explanation he could think of at the moment. But if that was the case, the situation would become very troublesome. Given General Yi's own battle strength, coupled with the power of the hollow spirit in his body, he might be even more astonishing than snakes. The key was the way they had handled General Yi. Given Blademaster's realm, the hollow spirit that had invaded his body wouldn't be as easily shaken as it had been with Teacher Lu from number 60 high school. Given that he wasn't completely confident that he could force the hollow spirit out of his body, Ajwa could only think of one way, and that was kill Blademaster. Chapter 1251. Killing the Sword Saint was a decision made out of desperation. But whether or not he had the courage to carry it out was another matter. This was a matter of great importance, and Ajwa didn't dare act rashly. Furthermore, Senior Immortal from the Union had been detained, So the second wave of power in the Union was represented by Blademaster. Given Senior Immortal's strength, it was impossible for him not to have sensed General Yi's abnormality. It was likely that they were still in the middle of negotiating. At this point, the situation gradually became clear, and Ajwa now began to understand why the head of state had chosen Huagua Water Curtain Group. The fact that one of the 10 generals had been invaded by the Void was a serious matter of utmost secrecy. If the head of state had chosen to act directly, it might have exposed this matter even more quickly, or even blown up. Once it got out, some unscrupulous media in the border country would exaggerate, add fuel to the fire, and create a story out of nothing, which would definitely cause a certain degree of panic. Thus, this matter could only be handled coldly by a third party. It was just that the head of state had overlooked one thing, and that was Battlesek's variable. In this silent war, Battlesek's blade had not only directly disrupted this barbed wolf inside the Union, it had also disrupted the rhythm of the entire Foundation. But the head of state didn't stop Battlesect. The fact that Battlesect could form an alliance with Huagua Water Curtain Group so quickly meant that it had probably received the head of state's instructions behind the scenes. This was good news. It proved that the head of state still had a positive attitude toward Battlesec's current joint operation with Huagua Water Curtain Group. Mr. Zhua, what should we do next? Seeing Ajwa frowning in thought, even if he didn't say it now, Keon could imagine the tangled web of relationships behind it. Stay here and wait for the results, Mr. Keon. Once the Magic Ball's investigation report comes out, find a way to let me know, Ajwa said as he looked at Keon. Then where are you going, Mr. Zhua? My Shifu deduced that the Foundation will definitely come looking for me for revenge. I have to get out of here quickly. Because of Snake. I'm afraid so. Ajwa nodded. Judging from the information provided by Wang Ling's Shifu, the Foundation's envoys were on their way. Tonight at the earliest, tomorrow morning at the latest, the experts dispatched by the Foundation would all arrive. After saying goodbye to Snake, Ajwa returned to the place where his dream had begun. Songhai No. 60 High School. Tomorrow, all the schools in Songhai City would be closed for 3 days, and all the teaching staff would be evacuated. Now that the school was empty, it was the perfect place to fight. At that moment, Ajwa held Jinka in his left hand and Bai Qiao in his right. He sensed the immense spirit power emanating from the sword, which was like a tsunami of stars. After carefully sensing it, Ajwa actually saw the endless dazzling Milky Way ribbons. Although he had only heard Shifu Wangling talk about it once, after experiencing it for himself, he indeed couldn't find any words to describe this enormous power. Lady Bai Qiao, sorry to trouble you. Before stepping into the teaching building, Ajwa waved his hand and Bai Qiao flew into the air. The cage of the scabbard was ready, and he would not let any of the offending enemies leave alive. Those who offend my Huaxiao nation will be punished no matter how far away they are. Then he went to the headmaster's office and sat in Headmaster Chen's seat. Who knew if Headmaster Chen, this stingy guy, had predicted that there would be a battle at No. 60 High, but he had actually removed everything from his headmaster's office, not even leaving the water dispenser behind. Looking at the empty headmaster's office, Ajwa could only wait by the window. At around 10 o'clock in the evening, an unfamiliar aura stepped into No. 60 High from the school gate. There was an irritable smell in this aura, and Ajwa could smell gunpowder from afar. The streetlights in the school square illuminated the figure of a man. It was a man with a snow-white beard. His posture was straight and tall, and his body was burly. He was at least 2 meters tall. Toidly. Ajwa stared at the man who had suddenly appeared in No. 60 High School Square. He checked the information which Book of Sage Immortal had given him on his phone, and confirmed that the man in front of him was indeed Toidly, the War Throne emissary. At that moment, standing in the square in heavy metal armor, he looked like a Western knight. The light from the streetlights reflected off his armor, and it gave off an incomparably thick, metallic glow. As expected of the War Throne emissary, you were actually able to calculate my position. Although Ajwa had been certain from the beginning that the Foundation definitely had a way to find him, he was still a little surprised to see this War Throne emissary appear. It was the Star Emissary who calculated your position. Toidly laughed. By killing the Sun Emissary, you have offended the entire Foundation. Do you think you can get away with it? In fact, your actions are also a declaration of war against the League of Nations. Apollo was a good man, and indeed didn't deserve such a fate. Audua stared at Toidley and sighed. It looks like you don't know what on earth happened to Apollo. Toidley shook his head, and had no intention of listening to Audua's explanation. I've long heard of your reputation, but it turns out that you're not far from what I imagined. Not only is your realm low, you're only at the golden core stage, and you have a glib tongue that makes people laugh. I realize that the people of your foundation speak Mandarin very well. Audua chuckled. All the cultivators of the League of Nations are proficient in the 8 languages, Toidley said confidently. I used to have a lover who was a citizen of your Wuxia nation. You should know, Mr. Toidley. The lady you're intimate with gave birth to a son for you. Audua stared at Toidley. He didn't intend to beat around the bush, and directly laid his cards on the table. You even investigated this foreign illegitimate child. What does that have to do with you? Toidley snorted. I'm warning you, Audua. This has nothing to do with me. I've done everything to ensure your safety. It's that scheming woman who wanted to cling to me. That's why this accident happened. That's right. It must have been that woman who poked a hole in my little umbrella. She was the one who seduced me. Audua's face gradually turned gloomy at these words. Do you know, Mr. Chariot? What I hate the most in life is people like you who shirk responsibility and don't take responsibility. Audua raised Jinka and pointed the tip of the sword at Toidley. You are indeed my senior in cultivation. But whether or not a person can shoulder the responsibility has nothing to do with age. Do you think you can kill me with a wooden sword? Toidley sneered. Wrong, I'm not going to kill you. Audua shook his head. I'm going to completely destroy you, soul and body. Chapter 1252. Even if Toidley said he looked down on Audua, but in reality, from his furrowed brows, it could be seen that he did not take this battle lightly. Apollo Lideman, the Sun Messenger, had died at Audua's hands. Tank couldn't help pondering how Audua had defeated the Sun Emissary, when there was also a huge disparity in their realms. As a swordsman, Tank unsheathed his silver greatsword from his waist. The full name of his sword was Silver God of War, or Silver God. Tank's expression was unperturbed. After his experience fighting the hollow spirits, he could now tell whether a person had been infected by the hollow spirits from their aura. Of course, this method might not be completely accurate. However, the war chariot's aura was stable, and its breath was filled with dense spiritual energy. There was a clear difference between him and the inhuman snake. Thus, the chances of the war chariot being infiltrated by the hollow were very low. But Audua still felt a little uneasy. He stared at the greatsword in Tank's hand that emanated thick silver radiance and frowned slightly, instinctively sensing that something was not right. Your sword. Audua felt that there was something wrong with this silver greatsword, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Anyone can talk big. Today, you will die for sure. The Star Emissary calculated that I have a 95% chance of winning this battle. At this moment, Tank was wielding the silver greatsword. He raised it high and slashed in the direction of the academic building. The 10-meter-tall silver sword chi slashed out, creating an earth-shattering sound. The ground was split in two. The entire school building was cut in half in an instant, and then it collapsed, the rubble and debris splattering everywhere. With just one slash of Tank's sword, one of number 60 High's school buildings was razed to the ground and reduced to rubble. Standing in the ruins, Audua looked around. Only then did he realize that it wasn't just the principal's office. All the desks and chairs in the classroom, as well as the equipment used in teaching, had been cleared and taken away. It seemed like Headmaster Chen had long predicted that there would be a battle today. Thus, he thought that he could take advantage of this battle to give number 60 High a free demolition. At that moment, Audua marveled in his heart at Headmaster Chen's calculations. It was really scary to have such an economical man as the principal. But the truth was that he and Headmaster Chen had a tacit understanding. This was also the reason why he had chosen number 60 High School. Number 60 High's renovation was imminent. If the old didn't go, the new wouldn't come. Hiring someone to demolish the house would cost extra money, so it was better to do it this way. After that strike, Tank stared at Audiobook, who was standing in the rubble. That strike just now was so powerful that it could split the land within dozens of li in two, let alone destroy a school building. But what surprised Tank was that his blade aura was blocked by a barrier when it reached the back of the teaching block. Then, his powerful sword chi melted into the barrier like a clay ox disappearing into the sea. What was that thing? The war chariot emissary felt a little apprehensive. After seeing the silver greatsword's astonishing destructive power, Audiobook was glad that his plan to have Senior Bai Qiao turn into a sword sheath cage to surround number 60 high school had been correct. This cage could only be entered, but not exited. Moreover, it could block all the energy, preventing their battle from spreading to other places. As expected of a foundation under the alliance, any random emissary has the battle strength of a true immortal. Audiobook just smiled faintly. In all fairness, I think SBP is a very promising organization. You once established this foundation to expose the truth. But now, you've deviated from your original intentions and have become an organization that buries the truth. If everyone in your organization was like Mr. Klein and had the sincerity to pursue the truth, there wouldn't be so many problems now. Hearing this, Tank was blank and didn't say anything. Indeed, he couldn't refute Audiobook's words. But in this world, people would die for wealth, just as birds would die for food. Who could be completely virtuous? Now that the world is suffering from the disaster of the Void invasion, the foundation that was supposed to expose the truth has chosen to pretend to be deaf and mute. Let me ask you, Mr. Tank, do you know nothing at all? The so-called true immortal is just a name for a realm. You call yourselves immortals, but you may not have the strength of an immortal. Audiobook's words finally caused Tank's expression to change drastically. In a few words, Audiobook had already poked at Tank's sore spot. You say I'm not an immortal? I actually say I'm not an immortal. He was so angry that he was almost trembling, as if he had suffered some great humiliation. His furious gaze pierced through the silver helmet and landed directly on Audiobook's face, making him feel a little itchy. Audiobook, you're definitely going to die today. The next moment, Toydre took a deep breath. He brandished the silver greatsword and then abruptly thrust it into the ground. Tremendous spirit power fluctuations instantly spread out, and then gradually solidified in the air. It was a group of snow-white Qilins wrapped in impenetrable silver armor. Is this the sword spirit of the Een God Greatsword? Audiobook's pupils contracted slightly. This sword spirit was extraordinarily huge. At least to Audiobook's knowledge, this sword spirit's size had already exceeded the norm. From a distance, it looked like a monster that had landed on Earth from another planet. In front of this sword spirit, a human body was as tiny as an ant. There was something wrong with this sword spirit. Audiobook frowned deeply as he looked at this snow Qilin, which was hundreds of feet tall. He could even sense that the oppressive aura emanating from this sword spirit was already greater than that of Toydre himself. Very quickly, Audiobook figured out what on earth was going on. You made your sword spirit accept the void? There was no mistaking it. He could sense from this snow Qilin the same way that Snake did, that it had been invaded by a hollow spirit. At that moment, the snow Qilin had been summoned as a sword spirit, and rather than roar, it was more like wailing. Although Audiobook didn't know what method the Foundation had used to actually control a hollow spirit and a sword spirit to merge, he could hear that as a sword spirit, the snow Qilin was instinctively resisting a hollow spirit. The hollow spirit's invasion was devouring the snow Qilin's will, and it was feeling pain. Have you finally realized, Audiobook? Toydre laughed wildly. At first, I wasn't going to use this trump card, because the fusion between my sword spirit and the hollow spirit isn't perfect. It's very easy for it to go berserk. But now I've thought it through. This isn't my land, so why should I be so polite? Hearing this, Audiobook's face was expressionless. Everything was just as he had thought. Not only did the Foundation have a lot of information on the hollow spirit, it now looked like they even had secret experiments on them. They had actually turned around and used the hollow spirit to merge it with a weapon spirit, thereby multiplying the power of a magic weapon by tens of thousands of times. Feeling the sword spirit monster which he had created with his own hands, Toydre stared at Audua and smiled sinisterly. To tell you the truth, when I saw my sword spirit grow because of the hollow spirit's power, even I was a little tempted. Do you know why I investigated Yi Jiang? He's my flesh and blood. And I wanted to see how strong the bastard born of that bitch could become after being invaded by a hollow spirit. Hearing this, Audua spat on the spot. This scum. Chapter 1253. On a high-rise building dozens of meters away from number 60 High's battlefield, a beautiful and dignified nun with a veil gazed at the battle in front of her. She had been brought here 3 minutes after Tank had arrived. She had wanted to directly go in and declare war on Audua. But the battle between Tank and Audua had already begun. Thus Moon decided to stay on the side and watch, and collect information on Audua in passing. At that moment, a young man's voice rang out from behind Moon. Mother Teresa, you really are the Moon emissary. Mother Teresa wanted to turn around, but the voice stopped her. Don't turn around. I don't want anyone to know what I look like, said the young man. Judging from this sexy and magnetic voice, this was probably a good-looking young man. Teresa obeyed and didn't turn her head. She smiled slightly. Let me guess your star. Only you can calculate who I am. Smart woman, said the voice behind her. At that moment, the star emissary was hiding in the shadows. He was the third person to arrive. After calculating Moon's position, he had come here of his own accord to watch the battle with Moon. Moon. Tank said that you gave him a 95% chance of winning? Star. That's right. Moon shook his head. But I don't think his battle will be easy. He's even using his trump card now. It's a semi-void magic artifact formed by fusing a hollow spirit and a sword spirit. This is something the Foundation is still experimenting with. Someone has to put it into practice. I still don't think it'll be a problem. At that moment, Star's expression was still calm. How about this? I'll calculate his chances of winning again. How long will it take? Very soon 2 minutes will be enough. Abandoning his wife and son, experimenting with a sword spirit whom he had given birth to and had absolute trust in him, and not even sparing his own son. By the time Tank said his lines, Audua was already furious. He was trying hard to suppress his anger. He couldn't let his emotions affect the battle at hand. For scum like Tank, killing him with one sword strike would be letting him off too easily. Moreover, Audua was still thinking about how to save Silver God. Although the Snow Kirin had obtained unparalleled power due to the invasion of the void creatures, it was also suffering a great deal of pain. Right now, the Snow Qilin was like a balloon that was already at its limit. It could explode at any time. But to Tank, the Silver God Greatsword was perhaps as meaningful as the women he had played with. Even if it was broken, it was just a matter of replacing it. Open the gate. At that moment, Audua exhaled slightly. In the morning, he had already used the spiritual energy of 6 reservoirs to increase his level. And now he was playing the same trick again. Raising his cultivation level was also to increase the strength of his physical body. This was to ensure that his physical body would not be affected by the huge impact and collapse in the next attack. It's actually the Heaven's Path divine art. An excited smile appeared on War Chariot's face. Audua didn't disappoint. And he now knew why Sun had died at Audua's hands. However, this kind of increase in realm was only temporary. The biggest taboo was to fight a protracted war. So when War Chariot saw Audua use 33 Path Primordial Chi, he had already made up his mind. That was to attack first, and if things went south he would choose a delaying tactic. Once Audua's temporary increase wore off, he would counterattack. Unfortunately, this was a wishful thinking. Audua had no intention of leaving anything for War Chariot. At that moment, Audua spread out his right hand, and the peachwood sword in it lit up with brown spirit light. Little by little, it attached itself to his entire body. When Jinka's sword chi enveloped Audua's entire body, the outer layer made of sword chi was like the iron scales of battle armor, which appeared piece by piece on Audua's suit jacket. This sword, looking at this scene, War Chariot couldn't help sweating. The peachwood sword that he had previously looked down upon actually brought him a huge sense of oppression at this time. Involuntarily, War Chariot felt the armor on his body actually start to become heavier. It wasn't because the armor had become heavier, but because the pressure on his mind had increased. This was very much like a natural spirit beast's stress response when it encountered its natural enemy. The spirit will become tense in an instant. Then his breathing would become heavy. Sweat would start to ooze from his body. Even incontinence, Audiobook, holding this mind-shaking peachwood sword, walked toward War Chariot step by step like a zenith heaven golden immortal descending from the sky. When he came back to his senses, Audiobook was already less than 3 meters in front of War Chariot. Because of his spiritual fear, War Chariot was astonished to find that his mind had actually gone blank for a period of time. And he had blacked out. That was impossible. How could he, the Grand War Chariot, die here? The Star Emissary had clearly divined for him. His chances of winning were as high as 95%. Silver God, ram them to death. In his panic, War Chariot started to order the Snow Chelan behind him. But what shocked War Chariot was, the Snow Chelan merely roared once and didn't follow his instructions. Audiobook didn't need to think to know how much the Snow Chelan was struggling in its heart at that moment. Its main body's will was clearly still engaged in a fierce struggle with the hollow spirits. In addition, the Snow Chelan had already sensed that the enemy it was facing was the Lord of the Sword Spirits. How could it, a mere sword spirit, attack the great Lord of the Sword Spirits? The Snow Chelan's strong desire to live caused its mental state to collapse even further, and it started to struggle with the hollow spirits that had invaded its body for the will of the spiritual space. Roar! After an earth-shattering roar, the Snow Chelan raised its front hooves, but it wasn't aiming at Audiobook. Its front hooves slammed down hard on the top of War Chariot's head. Damn it! Damn it! I'm your master! Aren't you afraid of the backlash from the contract? Toydley would never have dreamed that this would actually happen. He couldn't understand why his sword spirit wouldn't listen to him. Even less could he understand why the sword spirit of the Silver God Greatsword would turn around and attack him, its master. You reap what you sow. At that moment, Audiobook's lips curled up slightly. In front of the Lord of the Sword Spirits, any identity as a sword master was useless. Those so-called sword spirit contracts were just pieces of scrap paper. It's time for you to be free, Silver God. Audiobook looked at the berserk Snow Chelan, raised Jinka, and gently waved it in the air. In a flash, the sword spirit contract between Silver God and War Chariot was directly severed. The roar then stopped, and the whole world fell silent. Without the contract, the Snow Chelan instantly turned into particles of light. It was no longer anyone's slave. Instead, it returned to being the spirit of all living things, and waited for a new master who was worthy of its wholehearted trust to appear. Audiobook's sword. It turned the contract into scrap paper, and also destroyed the hollow spirit attached to the Snow Chelan's body. It forcibly severed the contract. The astonishing backlash instantly hit War Chariot himself, causing him to spit up a mouthful of blood. At that moment, War Chariot was in a terrible state. After being trampled by the Snow Chelan, half of his body had sunk into the ground, and now he had suffered internal injuries from the backlash. The outcome of the battle was already very clear. Audiobook sneered. Looking at War Chariot's battered and exhausted appearance, he still didn't feel the slightest bit of pity in his heart. He slashed out with sword chi. He only used a tiny bit of Jinka's strength. That indestructible sword chi completely disintegrated War Chariot's armor on the spot. This layer of armor is your shame. Now I've even torn off your underwear. Audiobook stared at War Chariot, who was lying on the ground with fear in his eyes, and said lightly, "By the way, I'll also sever your spirit root with this sword." The whole process took less than 2 minutes, and the battle was already over. On the other side of the tall building, the Star Emissary cried out in alarm, "Impossible! What the hell is this?" He was frightened by the huge variable in his deduction. "What did you calculate?" The Moon Emissary was also amazed at that moment. She had seen Audiobook in the battle with just 2 sword strikes. The Star Emissary also spat up a mouthful of blood at that moment. I saw the peachwood sword in Audjua's hand, and its scabbard. He had seen Audjua enter number 60 high with Jinka in his left hand and the white scabbard in his right. He had just taken a peek at it. In the blink of an eye, his spirit had suffered a terrible backlash, and he had been directly blinded in one eye. A peachwood sword and a scabbard? What on earth are you talking about? These two things turned the situation around greatly and increased Audjua's chances of winning. The star emissary simply didn't dare believe the data he had calculated. A 200 quadrillion% chance of winning. This was simply holding a father in his left hand and a mother in his right. What the hell, a plant? Chapter 1254. The star emissary would never have dreamed that the battle would be over before it had even started. Mother Teresa was an honest person. She had in fact already heard the sound of Star vomiting blood, but remembering that Star had told her before not to look back, she stayed where she was and didn't move. Star, are you all right? To be honest, she was very nervous. As one of the Foundation's emissaries, she had watched helplessly as an emissary was seriously injured before he had even officially joined the battlefield. This was a very complicated feeling for Teresa. Was this Audjua a monster? If you need my help, just ask. I have some healing methods, Teresa said. In fact, she wasn't a combat type, but a supportive healer. In the world of healers, she was even known as the mother of all stars. No need, you can't help me, Star said weakly. He had already taken the tonic he carried with him. But at most, this medicine could only help him recover from his internal injuries. The damage to his vision was probably already irreversible. He had directly lost his sight in his right eye, and his remaining left eye was about 2,000 degrees short-sighted, which was almost no different from being blind. Now that the star emissary had opened his eyes, there was only a trace of chilling light left in his left eye. It had taken him hundreds of years to hone this pair of eyes that could peer into the secrets of heaven, but he had never expected to suffer such a devastating blow in an instant. He had even anticipated that there was something strange about Audjua, but hadn't dared look at him. He had just flashed back and glanced at him. In the end, he had ended up like this. There's only judgment and fate left. Teresa sighed. She felt that the fool's emissary was also an expert, but she didn't know why the judgment emissary had suddenly excluded him. But Teresa was well aware that if she wanted to survive in the Foundation, the best way was to not ask too many questions. She would just go with the flow. Back then, she had only joined the Foundation for the high reward it offered her. The wisest choice was to protect herself for the sake of the reward. So when she saw that the chariot in front of her was seriously injured, she didn't have the slightest intention of helping it. Audjua was too scary. Going up now would be courting death. Nowadays, the judgment emissary basically had the final say in the Foundation. Teresa didn't think it was worth risking her life to save a chariot. She even thought that Audjua had fought well. Shouldn't this scumbag who treated women as toys be taught a lesson? Currently, Tank was completely naked and buried in the ground. He was already crippled. His spirit root had been severed and he had lost all his realms. In addition, his upper body was seriously injured. Now even an ordinary person could give him one last stab. And now, Tank had clearly lost his mind. The double blow to his body and mind made it impossible for him to accept everything that was happening in front of him. I'm an immortal. I'm really an immortal. He kept muttering these words as his eyes lost focus. After this incident, Tank would probably spend the rest of his life in a mental hospital. Audjua felt that this was the best punishment for such a person. At the same time, Audjua once again marveled at Jinka's terrifying strength. To be able to sever one's spirit root without harming one's life, apart from this sword spirit master, there was probably no other sword spirit in this world that could achieve such accuracy. If an ordinary cultivator's spirit root were to be severed, they would definitely die. At that moment, Audjua heard a few scattered claps from outside the school gate. He raised his head and saw a man in a black cloak approaching him from the direction of his line of sight. The man clapped his hands as he walked into number 60 high school. He took off his big hood, and Audjua saw the black mask under which the word fate was written in red. Judging from the color of his hair, he seemed to be an Asian. Book of Sage Immortal had sent Audua almost all the information on the Foundation's emissaries, including the Judge Su Bai. But Book of Sage Immortal was still investigating this Fate emissary. At that moment, the Fate emissary had appeared. Audua was also speculating about his identity. Judging from the color of his hair, he seemed to be an Asian. Are you from Wuxia? As expected, Director Zhuo is smart. The voice of the Fate emissary under the Fate mask was clearly altered. It seemed that this Fate emissary was hiding his identity. I never thought that not all of the Foundation's emissaries would be foreigners, said Audua. Jinka in hand, he was ready to fight. Audua, are you here for tank for revenge? Then let's begin. Let me say this first. I'm not here for tank. I'm fighting for myself. The Fate emissary said. Before tank came, I already expected this situation. It's just that it's going to be a little more tragic than I imagined. Listening to Fate's words, Audua somehow felt that this person's tone was familiar, as if he had met him before, but he couldn't put his finger on who the other party was. You say you're fighting for yourself. Audua wasn't in a hurry to make a move. He wanted to get more information out of Fate. I've taken a fancy to your wooden sword. If you give it to me, not only will you avoid a fight, you'll also be able to save your own life. Wearing the Fate mask, he said this very calmly. Unlike Tank and Snake's boundless conceit, it was as if victory was truly in his grasp. Snake and Tank both died at my hands. Are you confident that you can beat me? Audua looked at him. Like Tank, this Fate emissary's aura was pure and hadn't been invaded by the ethereals. But with the experience of fighting Tank, Audua was also wary of the magic weapons that Fate might use. The people of the Foundation were a bunch of lunatics. God knew if Fate had injected the ethereal into its magic instrument or not. Don't worry, I'm not like a despicable person like Tank. I'm truly capable. The Fate emissary stepped forward at that moment. He then took out his weapon, which was an emerald green bamboo. The bamboo had been shaved to a very sharp point, like a blade. Under the faint light, its entire body exuded a luster similar to that of amber glass. Audua was instantly on guard. The greatest truths were simple. The simpler a weapon looked, the more unparalleled its power might be. Wasn't the peachwood sword in his hand such an existence? Do you know the Sword of Destiny, Director Zhuo? At that moment, the Fate emissary raised his head and looked at Audua. I have a feeling that the Sword of Destiny in my hand might come from the same place as the peachwood sword in your hand. As soon as he said this, he vanished into thin air. In a flash, he appeared behind Audua in the blink of an eye. You're slow to react, Director Zhuo. But it's also fate that you were stabbed by me. As soon as he said this, the bamboo sword instantly pierced through the sword chi wrapping Audua's body and stabbed him in the kidney. Audua felt as if a foreign object had invaded him from behind, and blood dripped down the tip of the bamboo. It actually pierced through Lord Jinka's sword chi. Shocked, Audua clenched his teeth and pulled his body out of her. No, not pierced, but ignored. At that moment, Jinka's voice rang out inside Audua's body. Ignored sword chi? What on earth is this? Hearing Jinka's words, Audua was even more astonished. Jinka's voice was calm. It's fine. When Bai Qiao and I combine, we can beat it. Were they finally going to combine? Audua nodded. Enduring the pain of his kidney being pierced, he sheathed the peachwood sword. Chapter 1255. Audua believed that there were very few magic weapons in the world that could ignore sword chi, let alone Jinka's sword chi. Being hit by the bucket kidney was indeed painful, but fortunately, it did not directly injure his vitals. At that moment, the peachwood sword's sword chi gently flowed into his wound and healed it. The kidney was a man's key, and this envoy of fate was vicious. Fortunately, he had Jinka's sword chi to protect him, so Audua felt that he could still be happy for the rest of his life. But when Jinka and Bai Qiao became one again, an astonishing sense of oppression swept through the area. The youth dressed in a snow-white fur coat seemed to have come from the Milky Way. Starlight sparkled on his body, and he was so clean that there wasn't a trace of dirt or filth on him. He was like a king who had arrived on the stage, insufferably arrogant. This was Lord Jingbai. Ajwa looked at the figure in front of him in astonishment. At this moment, the young man's feet were off the ground and he was suspended in the air, staring at the messenger of fate before him expressionlessly. He snorted disdainfully. Trash like this is not worthy to see this king's lineup. I didn't expect that I would force you out in the end. To his surprise, this envoy of fate seemed to know Jingbai's identity. The moment he saw Jingbai appear, the pressure was clearly on fate's side. But for some reason, Ajwa felt that this envoy of fate seemed a little excited. Boom. The next moment, Destiny's aura suddenly surged. It was as if a fountain of energy had erupted from his body, like a volcano. Ajwa was surprised. What surprised him was not the sudden increase in aura, but the sword Dao behind this sudden increase in aura. If his judgment was correct, what Destiny was using was General Yi's famous boundless sword Dao. His true identity was that of a sword saint? Ajwa was astonished. Although he felt that this person was familiar from the beginning, he still felt that this was not the sword saint style. At this moment, the Fate Envoy, who had activated the limitless sword Dao, laughed maniacally as he forcefully withstood the pressure. At the same time, he used the Sword of Destiny in his hand to predict where he would attack next. Ajwa. Next time, I will pierce through your heart. This is all fate's arrangement. Then the fate of Ben in high-speed movement. His figure once again disappeared from Ajwa's sight. This was a sword technique he had never seen before. First, a preview, then a precise implementation of the content of the preview. It was another incomparably mysterious angle. The bamboo, known as the Sword of Fate, cut in from an angle that Ajwa hadn't expected. Like the last attack, it ignored the defensive barrier of sword chi, and was aimed at Ajwa's heart. Jingbai shook his head, but he was faster than fate. The bamboo sword was only a few centimeters away from his chest. He directly attacked and circled behind Ajwa's back. He held the bamboo sword with his index finger. There were only a handful of swords that could ignore his sword chi. There was only one sword that Jingbai could think of. The messenger kept calling his bamboo sword the Sword of Destiny. But in fact, the true name of this bamboo sword spirit was Advance. The prophecy. A sword spirit that was born in the same place as him. He had even competed with him for the position of the sword spirit master. But in the end, he still won the throne by an overwhelming margin. Even Jingbai hadn't expected that their second meeting would actually be here. Is this the new master you've found? Jingbai's face was expressionless as he mercilessly criticized the messenger of fate in front of him. You're really too inferior. On the other side, after stabbing out, Fate tried to pull the bamboo sword away, but found that his sword was firmly stuck to it by a tremendous force. The disparity in strength made it impossible for the Sword of Fate to escape Jingbai's grasp. Get lost, this is fate's arrangement. Jingbai sneered. He returned the words of the messenger of fate without changing them. A sword light shot out of Jingbai's fingertip and traveled along the bamboo sword. This sword light was just a billionth of Jingbai's strength. But it was so fast and strong that it was far beyond what fate could have imagined. Not good. At that moment, fate gritted his teeth. He realized that he had to let go of the bamboo sword. But it was too late. The sword light traveled so fast that, like an electric shock, it swiftly poured into his sword-wielding right hand. In the blink of an eye, a crushing sword intent poured directly into Fate's right fingertip and crushed everything into powder along his finger. Fate reacted swiftly. He knew that he couldn't resist such a ferocious sword intent at all. The next moment, he gritted his teeth and used the finger sword in his left hand to cut off his entire arm along his right shoulder. This was to prevent this sword intent from spreading to the rest of his body. It was only then that Fate started to fear Jingbai. The sword spirit in front of him was too powerful. At the same time, he was deeply aware. He already couldn't take this kind of attack a second time. As a swordsman, the pain of losing one's arm was something that no one could understand. Damn it! At that moment he stared at the bamboo sword that Jingbai had snatched away, and his heart was filled with hatred. This damned liar. The sword spirit of the Sword of Fate had clearly told him that as long as he had him, he would win every battle. He had actually been swindled by a sword spirit. Winning every battle, it's all fake. Fate roared in pain at that moment. Jingbai Siji laughed when he heard this. He gripped the bamboo sword that he had snatched back from fate with a rather surprised expression on his face. You actually told him that you would win every battle. Clearly, even Jingbai thought that this was a blatant fraud. During this period of living on Earth, Jingbai knew that there were phone scams and text scams on Earth. The sword spirit's deception. This was the first time he had heard of it. The bamboo shook slightly in Jingbai's hand, as if in response to his question. Audiobook felt that after this sword of destiny fell into Jingbai's hands, it would be a different story. She was extremely obedient. A few seconds later, after knowing the truth, Jingbai raised his head and stared at the envoys of fate in front of him, who were dizzy with rage. He didn't lie to you, Jingbai said. From the very beginning, the forecast was very clear. He is below 1 spirit but above 10,000 spirits. He is victorious in every battle. Realization instantly dawned on Audiobook. It turned out that this messenger of destiny was too excited when he picked up the heaven-defying bamboo sword, and only heard the last 4 words. 10,000 battles, 10,000 victories. Listening to the whole sentence, it was indeed not a scam. Above all living beings, with this as a prerequisite, it could indeed be described as 10,000 battles and 10,000 victories. But perhaps even Zhu Jian himself would not have thought of it. The new master he had decided on. He had actually directly led him to the only man he couldn't beat. Sure enough, all of this had been arranged by fate. Take off your mask, fate. At that moment, Audiobook looked at the man in front of him who was deeply involved in the sword spirit's deception. He felt that this envoy of fate's true identity was either he was Blade Master, or he was someone who was very close to Blade Master. Could it be evil sword god? But this guy was still playing landlord in prison. Chapter 1256. Audiobook actually always had his own answer to this envoy of fate's speculations. The number of people in this world who understood the limitless sword way was very limited, and the number of people who understood the sword way and could use it skillfully could be counted on one hand. Judging from the proficiency of the emissary of fate, his understanding of limitless sword Dao had already reached the acme of perfection. Apart from Blade Master, he really couldn't think of anyone else who was so proficient in this technique. Although Yi Jiang had displayed this sword principle in the National Body Technique competition, however, there was still a gap between a beginner and a well-practiced one. So, after ruling out the possibility that the envoy of fate was Yi Jiang, Audiobook could currently only think of one person. Jingbai folded his arms and blew lightly. Bang. There was a bang. The fate emissary's fate face immediately cracked and turned into fine powder. After seeing the other party's face clearly, Audiobook took a deep breath. It's really you. These 4 short words already proved that Audiobook's idea was completely correct. Sword Immortal Fan Rue. Back then, the man who was said to be dead but left behind a bunch of mysteries. In reality, the battle sect had also obtained some evidence to prove that the Sword Immortal was not dead. At that time, Audiobook had come to a basic conclusion. Back then, Sword Immortal Fan Rue put on a great show to help his disciple overcome his mental demons. For many years, the only person in the know, evil sword god's senior brother Yi Jianchuan, had been keeping this secret. After that, Sword Immortal Fan Rue completely vanished without a trace. He was like a cloud of smoke that evaporated from the world, disappearing without a trace. The last time he had seen Sword Immortal Fan Rue was in a book called Cultivation Sword Dao History. He saw the black and white photo of Sword Immortal Fan Rue recorded in the history books. Who would have thought that after so many years, he would actually see him in person, and under such circumstances at that? I never thought that after disappearing for so many years, you would actually join the Foundation. Audiobook sighed with emotion. He saw Sword Immortal Fan Rue in a sorry state. He really couldn't figure out why an immortal sword immortal who had nurtured a sword sage would choose to join the Foundation, to help the wicked and do those despicable things. Audiobook had many questions. He even wanted to curse out loud. But he opened his mouth and said nothing in the end. He recalled what Fan Rue had said to him before the battle. He's fighting for himself. Then the real purpose of him joining the Foundation seemed a bit thought-provoking. I have my own difficulties. You won't understand. Fan Rui stood up. His entire right arm had been cut off, and the ground was covered in blood. The gurgling blood had already gathered at his feet and formed a pool of blood. The amount of blood was extremely shocking. I only beg of you to return that bamboo to me so that I can complete my final attack, Fan Rui said. Do you know what this means? I will die, Sword Immortal Fan Rui said with a smile. I predicted this battle several hundred years ago. For that, I must join the Foundation. It's just that I didn't expect the owner of the world's #1 sword to be you. Then you're mistaken. I don't have the ability to become his master. Audiobook smiled bitterly and gave Jingbai a look. Jingbai snorted and with a flick of his finger, the bamboo sword flew straight back to Fan Rui's feet. It doesn't matter if it's you or not. I still want to thank you for giving me the chance to challenge you. Fan Rui picked up the sword with his left hand. He was grateful that the bamboo sword had accompanied him on this path. At the same time, Fan Rui was well aware that his behavior wasn't something that ordinary people could understand. But it didn't matter. He had been fighting for himself all this time. At that moment, Sword Immortal took a deep breath and was ready for his final attack. Boundless Sword Dao all out. As soon as he said that, powerful sword chi surged out of Sword Immortal's body. For a moment, the ground around Fan Rui was hit by the sword chi, leaving dozens of deep ravines. This sword chi almost blotted out the sky and the earth, like a raging tsunami. Audiobook was astonished by such an astonishing amount. The man in front of him was indeed as strong as written in the history textbook he had read, and there was nothing exaggerated about it. However, this strength was only limited to the strength on earth. No matter how strong Sword Immortal Fan Rui's aura was, it was still just a drop in the ocean compared to Jingbai. The next moment, he roared and charged forward. He was as fast as lightning. In a short period of time, Fan Rui used the power of Boundless Sword Dao to turn the bamboo sword in his hand into thousands of them. He had actually transformed sword intent into thousands of them. At that moment, all that was left in Audiobook's heart was astonishment. If Jingbai wasn't here, even if Audiobook's reservoir was all out, he might not be Fan Rui's match. Faced with the thousands of bamboo swords that were about to reach him, Jingbai simply flicked his sleeve to create a sword barrier in front of him. The brown spirit sword barrier turned into a solid shield that kept the thousands of bamboo swords at bay, preventing Fan Rui from getting any closer. The disparity in strength was still there. If this goes on, you'll die from the backlash. Jingbai looked at the man in front of him. In fact, he also didn't quite understand the other party's actions, which were like moths flying into a flame. Perhaps for someone who had pursued Sword Dao all his life, dying under the world's #1 sword could be considered a kind of romance? Jingbai was expressionless. He acted according to orders and didn't have the slightest bit of mercy for Fan Rui. On the other side, Fan Rui was also doing his best to use the bamboo sword in his hand to take a step forward. The tip of his sword extended forward at a speed of a few millimeters, which could almost be described as minuscule. Audiobook didn't know what on earth Fan Rui's objective was. As time passed, he saw that Sword Immortal Fan Rui's body was already starting to crumble under the pressure of the sword barrier's backlash. Starting from the fingertips of his left hand, it turned into fine powder little by little. I've already won this battle. A few seconds later, Fan Rui laughed heartily. This man had completely disappeared from the face of the earth. It wasn't until then that Jingbai's pupils contracted. He already understood the real reason why Fan Rui had challenged him like Quafu chasing the sun. In a sense, that's indeed the case, Jingbai said expressionlessly. What does Lord Jingbai mean? Audiobook didn't understand. Fan Rui clearly has a stronger Sword Dao, so why does he keep using his disciple's famous technique in battle? Jingbai said. Audiobook was a little enlightened at this point. Indeed. As a sword immortal, Fan Rui's Sword Dao was also superb. But he had been using General Yi's unique, boundless Sword Dao for all his attacks just now. There had to be a deeper meaning behind this. In terms of Sword Dao, he's indeed a lunatic. Jingbai gave his final evaluation of Fan Rui's behavior. He never thought that Fan Rui would actually turn around and use him. By challenging him, the world's #1 swordsman, Fan Rui had fused himself with Boundless Sword Dao, and turned it into the intent of Boundless Sword Dao. In other words, after Fan Rui's seemingly moth-to-the-flame challenge ended, Boundless Sword Dao had officially become a branch of Sword Dao and Heavenly Dao. This had been Fan Rui's goal from the very beginning. After listening to Jingbai's explanation, Audua was suddenly enlightened. Perhaps this was Fan Rui's way of proving his Sword Dao. At the same time, he was also making a final contribution for his disciples and grand disciples. Just like that, this envoy of the Foundation's destiny had fallen. But Audua knew that the battle wasn't over yet. President Bai, I know you're here. Come on out. At that moment, Audua turned his gaze in one direction. In the air, a young man with a devilish smile on his face stepped out of the crack. Chapter 1257. In some sense, Audua felt that President Bai was his Shifu's lifelong enemy. But this lifelong enemy was more miserable. Almost all of his life had been slapped to death with just a few slaps. Audua didn't know how many blows President Bai had appeared in front of him at that moment. He didn't know how many blows his Shifu could take. Audua stared at the young man who had come back to life in front of him. He was dressed in a black noble robe with a red moon pattern, and a pure black belt wrapped tightly around his slender waist, making him look tall and straight. His every movement was full of the air of a Western aristocrat. Before being invaded by President Bai, this young man had been called Michel, and was the owner of Castle of the Dark Knight. It could be seen that although President Bai had become a hollow spirit and invaded Michel, he hadn't abandoned Michel's original elegant and noble temperament. At that moment, he gripped his cane and stared in Audua's direction as he sneered. The former Michel no longer exists. There was nothing left of the former President Bai. The one standing in front of you now is a new me. My name is Su Bai. An elegant and magnetic male voice rang out. Su Bai didn't speak. Audua was startled to realize that this voice was actually ringing out directly in his head. Can you feel it? This is the power of a high-level life form. I am all things and all things are me. This is a power that resonates with all things. Only hollow spirits, who don't have a physical body, can do this easily, Su Bai said calmly. Even with Jingbai present, he was completely unafraid. It was as if he really was invincible. I've realized that you Foundation people have one thing in common, and that is that you're very conceited. Audua looked at Su Bai as he carefully sensed the young man's fighting strength. Indeed, this Su Bai in front of him seemed to have a very different aura from the void spirits he had fought before. It was different from Snake's aura, and also different from the Silver God Greatsword Sword Spirit's aura which had been attached to a hollow spirit. Su Bai's fusion could almost be described as perfect. His entire body was seamless and without the slightest flaw. Audua, perhaps you've already sensed it. At that moment, Su Bai smiled slightly and said, You shouldn't associate me with trash like Snake and Tank. One of them has just evolved, and the fusion isn't perfect. The other treats the ethereal as his own tool, and doesn't understand the meaning of becoming a higher being. Snake was killed by me with a single stroke of my sword. How many sword strikes do you think you can withstand? Audua also laughed. He really did not know why Su Bai was so confident, even though this man was different from all the void creatures he had seen before. But no matter how strong Su Bai was, could he be stronger than Lord Jingbai? Audua felt that even if his Shifu Wangling hadn't made a move, there was no way Su Bai could have withstood the power of Jingbai's sword. I know, maybe you don't understand what I'm saying, but strength will prove everything in the end. Su Bai was extremely confident. It was different from Snake's ethereal spirit that was transformed from a void magic sphere. He was someone who had been baptized by the Void Lord. At that moment, Su Bai turned the golden cane in his hand, and the scenery around number 60 high abruptly changed. Buzz. Bam. The school square under Audua's feet instantly turned into quicksand, and then suddenly softened and collapsed. In the blink of an eye, number 60 high's huge school square had actually turned into a bottomless black hole. At the same time, the space around him instantly became weightless, and Audua's body floated up involuntarily along with the endless rubble around him. This was another void creature's ability, which was called the Void Boundary. It was similar to the intrinsic spirit field of cultivators on Earth. In the blink of an eye, Audiobook had already fallen into Subai's trap and fallen into this void boundary. At that moment, Subai stood in the center of this endless abyss, his cane in hand. He was like a conductor of a carnival symphony, enjoying the thrill of the power of the void. This scene was like the end of the world. Below him was a bottomless abyss, and above him was a void vortex that could swallow up everything. Audiobook's body was being torn apart by two forces at the same time. He felt like his body had already been divided into two parts, which no longer belonged to him at all. If it wasn't for Jingbai's protective sword qi, he might have already become two lumps of flesh. Audiobook's expression changed, and the sweat dripping from his temples was sucked up by the void vortex above his head. Left with no choice, he drew his sword and slashed at Subai. Tens of thousands of feet of sword qi. The moment Jingbai swung his sword, it was torn apart by the two forces at the top and bottom. Before it could even get close to Subai, it was cleanly dispelled. Audiobook, now do you know why I'm not afraid of your sword? Subai sighed. Now that we're in my void boundary, I'm the only one who can decide everything. Hearing this, Jingbai's expression changed slightly. This was an extremely rare situation for him. The master of sword spirits. There was a trick to this void boundary. If Jingbai's calculations were correct, there was a power here that was similar to disarming. It didn't just target spirit swords. The power of all magic treasures would be perfectly disintegrated by the two forces at the bottom and bottom. All this time, I've been looking for a reason for my defeat. At that moment, Subai, who was standing in the center of the void boundary, said frankly, after countless deductions, I think the only reason for my defeat is magic weapons. Audiobook. Subai. Thank you, Lord, for giving me such a great ability that all magic weapons in the world are useless against me. Wang Ling has been able to run amok in the world for so many years, because of that strange peachwood sword in his hand. Including those slaps he gave me, he must have fused them with the power of the peachwood sword. Audiobook. So you attribute all this to the gap between our equipment? Subai. Isn't that the case? If he wasn't superior to me in terms of magic weapons, how could he have defeated me? Audiobook and Jingbai sighed inwardly. It seemed that after dying a few times, this person's IQ hadn't increased at all. This was a sore spot. No matter how many sit-ups he did in his coffin, it was impossible to improve his IQ. Jingbai was silent. The next moment, he turned around and transformed back into his sword form. In his view, this kind of idiot was already completely hopeless. One more look at him and he risked lowering his IQ. Thus, Jingbai couldn't avoid it in time, and had no intention of continuing to pay attention to Subai's senseless delusion. Although the sword qi had been devoured, he still had many ways to kill Subai. Don't, Lord Jingbai, what will I do if you leave? Audiobook cried out in his heart. Haven't you noticed yet? Your Shifu is already here. At that moment, Jingbai's voice rang out in Audiobook's mind. When Audiobook came back to his senses, a warm hand abruptly rested on his shoulder. It was that man. That man had just finished his homework and was here. Chapter 1258. A long time ago, Wang Ling had summed up several major illusions about fighting. For example, this move works, he's sweating, I must have scared him. This person is very young and his cultivation is shallow, so he shouldn't be hard to deal with. I couldn't beat him before, but I've already become stronger. The battle has just begun. He'll definitely lose if he attacks first. Now, in the face of President Bai, who had made a comeback and was so confident that he had turned into Subai. In response to Subai's excessive arrogance, Wang Ling had come up with several major illusions about invincibility. He was well aware of Subai's current mental state. For example, at the peak of immortals, I am proud of the world. With me, Subai, there will be heaven. Another example. Heaven does not give birth to Subai. Eternity is like a long night. For some reason, Wang Ling felt that these domineering proclamations were so laughable when they were used on Subai. Clearly, the scariest thing was that he didn't know it. Wang Ling sighed slightly and took the lead in sending Audiobook out of the battlefield. Because he could already hear sirens outside the void boundary. There was no way such a huge fluctuation of spirit power wouldn't attract the attention of the police. So he sent Audiobook out first to stabilize the situation, and at the same time organize the police force to disperse the surrounding people. But to be honest, Wang Ling felt that the battle here would be resolved very quickly. As expected of someone I've taken a fancy to, he was actually able to send someone out of my void boundary. Looking at the scene in front of him, Subai was surprised, but even more excited. Logically speaking, once someone was trapped in his void boundary, it would be impossible to get out so easily. But now, Wang Ling had chosen to send Audiobook out. In Subai's view, this was simply a touching drama of life and death. He felt that Wang Ling must have paid a heavy price to send Audiobook out of his void boundary and leave him with the hope of survival. After sighing with emotion, Subai also gave his own assessment. You treat your disciple pretty well. I'm very touched. Wang Ling felt that this person was already beyond saving. In fact, Wang Ling had come prepared for this trip. He had summed up the lessons he had learned from his fight with President Bai in Chapter 690. Back then, he hadn't finished his homework before he had been dragged into the fight, and the whole process had left him uneasy. So this time he had finished all his homework and rushed to the scene. Secondly, he had been worried that President Bai would ruin his school uniform the last time they fought. If the school uniform was damaged, he would have to deduct money from his pocket money to buy a new set. So after the last fight, he had enchanted all the clothes he was wearing when he got home. It was precisely because of this that his clothes weren't torn to shreds by the two enormous forces tearing at him from above and below as he stood in the void boundary. On the other hand, he was facing a familiar opponent. President Bai also summed up the lesson learned from last time. Before he became ethereal, his self-healing ability was his greatest trump card. Therefore, before the battle began, he had decided on a strategy of attrition. He planned to exhaust the youth's stamina before launching a counterattack. But young President Bai didn't know that even the most basic slap from the youngster had the effect of heavily injuring him. When he was slapped, he didn't even have the strength to fight back. Therefore, in this battle, after he evolved into White Void, he came up with a new strategy, which was to use his advantage as a void creature to suppress the enemy with firepower. Void creatures didn't need to worry about spirit energy consumption. Their energy source came from the void, and the void's energy source was inexhaustible. At that moment, the two of them stood alone in the void boundary. After looking at each other for a few seconds, they each had their own thoughts. Grasping his cane, White Void raised his sleeves, and an endless mass of void energy appeared in the void. These energy masses of various sizes appeared almost instantaneously around Wang Ling like the giant abyssal mouth of a prehistoric beast, and he was instantly surrounded so tightly that not even a drop of water could escape. For a moment, Wang Ling felt like he was trapped in an ocean ball. Wang Ling opened his king's eye, and the three-petaled golden lotus in his eyes bloomed, giving his pupils the color of a black hole. A tremendous devouring ability began to manifest. At that moment, Wang Ling's king's eye turned into the mouth of a giant beast, which sucked in all the energy nearby. In the face of such a dense mass of void energy, this was the best solution Wang Ling could come up with. If he forcibly destroyed it, even the aftershock from the explosion would be enough to destroy Songhai City. Casually dispelling his move, White Void's mind went blank again, just like the last time. He had already become a more advanced life form. Perhaps even White Void himself didn't realize it, but fine sweat had already started to trickle down his forehead. The other party could actually absorb all of his void energy with just his strength? No, that was impossible. At that moment, White Void turned his cane again in disbelief. He had an inexhaustible supply of void energy, and he didn't believe that Wang Ling could devour his energy endlessly. So troublesome. On the other side, Wang Ling could only repeat what he had done last time, and use the king's eye to absorb the energy again. Although Subai was overly conceited, he had actually guessed one thing correctly, and that was that the king's eye's capacity was in fact limited, and it was impossible for it to absorb energy endlessly. Once the space was full, Wang Ling had to find a way to release the energy stored in the king's eye. But at this rate, it would actually take a long time for it to be full. Bored to death, Wang Ling stood in the middle of the field and watched White Void's boring performance. After observing for a while, he was already a little impatient. Thinking of the online classes he had to take tomorrow, Wang Ling's heart was instantly filled with complicated emotions. This was the so-called suspension of classes didn't stop. Even if Wang Ling was at home, he still had to take online classes. Not only that, the school had also stipulated that every student had to record a learning video and send it to the class group. This undoubtedly added a lot of trouble to Wang Ling. This way, he couldn't let the two gremlins pen and eraser do his homework for him. And wasn't the main culprit behind why he was stuck at home taking online classes, because of this White Void standing in front of him? As the saying went, every debt had its debtor. In that instant, Wang Ling, who had to take online classes the next day, could no longer suppress his urge to slap White Void to death. Like the last time, he walked toward White Void step by step. But compared with the last time, White Void had indeed become stronger. Wang Ling couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't be able to directly kill him with one slap. But he still walked up to White Void and raised his hand. White Void sneered. "All physical attacks are useless against me. The moment your slap hits me, it will be completely swallowed up by the void." Slap. In the next moment, a solid slap landed on White Void's face. White Void's head was completely detached from his body and disappeared. This was just an ordinary slap. But it didn't seem to have achieved the effect that Wang Ling had hoped for. He sensed that White Void's aura hadn't completely disappeared. Sure enough, in the next moment, White Void's head grew back. Wang Ling understood what was going on at this scene. It turned out that the head wasn't a vital point. It looked like he would have to change his next slap. The error-free chapter of the daily life of the Immortal King will continue to be updated on Green Bean. There are no advertisements on the site, so please bookmark and recommend Green Bean. If you like the daily life of the Immortal King, please bookmark. The daily life of the Immortal King Green Bean updates the fastest. Chapter 1259. The moment Wang Ling's palm touched Su Bai's cheek, the warm and familiar touch instantly passed through the pores of Su Bai's face. Had the swallowing of the void failed? The moment he felt the pain, Su Bai asked this question in his heart. In fact, this wasn't the result of Su Bai's swallowing failure. Based on Wang Ling's current understanding of void creatures, the swallowing effect did indeed block all physical attacks and even magic attacks. However, Su Bai had missed out on something. That was when Wang Ling didn't use magic attacks. All of his normal attacks, including the slaps, were all true damage. So it wasn't that the swallowing of the void had failed. But from the very beginning, Su Bai had been too confident in his abilities as a void creature. But compared with the previous few battles, Wang Ling had to praise President Bai for being a lot steadier in his style. Su Bai hadn't been able to kill the other party with this slap, because President Bai had left something up his sleeve. This was another ability that Wang Ling had never seen on other void creatures. Su Bai called it Void Redemption. There was an inexhaustible source of energy behind the void gate, and this move drew on the power of the void behind the gate to reconstruct the damaged part of the body when it suffered a fatal blow. Before coming here, Su Bai had been extremely confident in his chances of winning this battle. But he had still left something up his sleeve, and had used the power of the void to customize a lot of human organs in advance, so that he could transfer them to Wang Ling at any time. Unfortunately, because of his confidence in this battle, Su Bai had only prepared a backup plan, and didn't have too many. He had calculated that if Wang Ling fought him, Wang Ling might slap him in the face, so he had prepared 5 heads in advance to replace them. Now there were only 4 left, but judging from the youngster's stance, it seemed that the other party had already lost interest in Su Bai's face, and was going to hit somewhere else. It wasn't that he didn't have any other body parts, but he didn't have as many as the heads. How many times had it been? Was he going to fail again? Su Bai couldn't help lamenting in his heart, as he sensed the obvious gap in strength between them. He had clearly given up on his mortal human body, and evolved into a higher creature. Why couldn't he beat this youngster? At that moment, Su Bai gripped his cane tightly, his palms already sweating. He had no other choice. He could only pray for the Void Master's help. The next moment, White Hollow's body began to change. He was trying to turn his body into a hollow spirit. That way, he would be able to control his body freely and teleport to wherever he wanted. Even if Wang Ling's slap could hit him, whether or not he could catch him was still a question. However, what shocked Su Bai was that, just as his body was about to transform, he was stunned by a terrifying suction force. Wang Ling's eyes again. That pair of eyes that seemed to be able to see through everything, penetrate the eternal night, and see through the boundless universe. The terrifying power of suction had the power to separate the false from the true. Su Bai's body froze on the spot. No form existed in front of the king's eye. In fact, all of this was Su Bai's own doing. He had become an ethereal. However, in order to sneak into the human world, he invaded someone else's body. Perhaps he was plotting his own grand plan. But as an ethereal, they had already become superior creatures without a physical body. Invading a human's body again, and merging with it was an act of lowering their status. Su Bai had thought that he could freely switch between a human and an ethereal body. But he had miscalculated again. The power of the king's eye. Damn it, it shouldn't be like this, it shouldn't be like this. Su Bai's heart began to break down. Every time this youngster dealt with him, he would come up with some new tricks that Su Bai didn't even know about. Each time, he didn't have the most comprehensive information. It was as if he was forever one step behind the youngster in front of him. The king's eye wasn't part of Dao. Wang Ling had only learned this secret not long ago. So even if Su Bai realized how powerful the king's eye was, there was no way he could deal with it. His eyes were probably the hardest things in the universe. There was no power that could pierce through them. Thus, Wang Ling wasn't worried at all about exposing the king's eye in front of Su Bai. Besides, would there be a next time? Wang Ling didn't believe that Su Bai could come back to life after this battle with another identity. At that moment, Su Bai, whose form was restricted by the king's eye, felt a deep stabbing pain in his soul. On the other side, Wang Ling wasn't going to give Su Bai any chance to think at all. His second palm was aimed at Su Bai's crotch, and he directly smashed the lower half of Su Bai's body, which was also an extremely fatal part. Wang Ling, don't look down on me. The battle isn't over yet. Su Bai suddenly roared at that moment. There was unwillingness and anger in this roar, but Wang Ling felt that it was more likely a sense of despair after a broken jar. Su Bai didn't have many organs left in his other body parts. Su Bai swiftly reacted to Wang Ling's second palm strike. Before Wang Ling's palm landed, he swiftly turned his face toward Wang Ling. Wang Ling marveled at Su Bai's operation. He had actually taken the initiative to use his face to block the knife for the other parts of his body. And so, after the second palm, he knew that there were only 3 white skulls left in his inventory. After his head was restored, Wang Ling realized that Su Bai was actually smiling at him. Wang Ling had clearly destroyed Su Bai twice already, but the other party was actually smiling like a victor. I never thought that I, Su Bai, would actually be able to withstand your second blow. Su Bai's words were laced with a deep sense of mockery. In Wang Ling's opinion, this person was probably already crazy. From the very beginning, Su Bai had stood in front of Wang Ling confidently, confident in his victory, and had threatened to kill Wang Ling. But at that moment, Su Bai had completely changed his attitude from before, and actually took pride in blocking as many slaps as he could. What a nerve-wracking and troublesome opponent. Wang Ling evaluated Su Bai in his heart. After a sigh, he sent a third palm strike towards Su Bai. This palm cut into the scorched area very craftily, and Wang Ling felt that this should be enough to end the battle. But just as his palm was about to touch Su Bai's face once again appeared precisely under Wang Ling's palm. Wang Ling, I told you not to look down on me. I've already bet that you'll attack from this angle. I still have 2 heads left. Although I can't beat you, at the very least, I can withstand your 4th palm. At that moment, Su Bai laughed maniacally. In this world, let me ask you, is there anyone who can withstand your 4th palm? Who else? For a moment, Wang Ling couldn't refute him. He felt that this person's head had been beaten out of shape. Chapter 1260. At that moment, Su Bai still had 2 heads left. For Su Bai, These were his last 2 lives. If he could block the next 2 blows, then he might become the man who had been slapped the most by Wang Ling. On the other side, Wang Ling's mood was particularly complicated when he delivered his 4th palm strike. He thought that this was probably how an adult's heart broke down. As a cultivator, had Baizhi worked hard enough? He was afraid so. In pursuit of a higher realm, he had once cultivated painstakingly for 1,000 years. In pursuit of a higher realm, he hadn't hesitated to betray and kill the boss who had supported him. In pursuit of a higher realm, he had even decided not to be human, and had completely dedicated his soul to the void. But what had he gotten in return? Baizhi. At that moment, Wang Ling carefully pondered President Bai's real name. Indeed, in Wang Ling's view, all of this had been a waste of effort. Evil people would be tormented by evil people. In Wang Ling's view, President Bai's fate had actually been decided a long time ago. In history, no matter how high the cultivation level of any cultivator who committed crimes was, their final outcome was not much better. There is reincarnation in heavenly Tao. Who will the heavens spare? This wasn't just a saying. Those cultivators who committed evil deeds would eventually be devoured by the evil deeds they had committed. Wang Ling didn't intend to give Su Bai another chance to deliver a 5th palm strike. His face was still expressionless when he delivered his 4th palm strike. What Su Bai didn't expect was that just as he was calculating which part of his body Wang Ling's palm would land on, Wang Ling's palm, which was about to reach him, instantly became enormous. Like the 5 fingers of a Buddha, his enormous palm blotted out the sky. In an instant, his entire body was covered. Is it all over? At this point, Su Bai realized that this battle was probably going to be over. There was no way he could evade Wang Ling's 4th strike. He had clearly tried so hard, but he already couldn't escape death. It was over. Boom. The palm fell. President Bai, who had challenged Wang Ling again after advancing into Su Bai, was completely destroyed. Wang Ling's 4th palm strike wasn't an ordinary one. He had combined dozens of heavenly Dao spells, and even used Fate Dao and Divine Dao. His physical body and soul had suffered a huge blow. All of this was to ensure that President Bai was completely eliminated, and that there was no possibility of him being resurrected. Wang Ling's palm didn't just eliminate President Bai in front of him, because it had fused with the power of Fate Dao. Even President Bai from the other parallel worlds had been completely destroyed. From now on, Baizhi no longer existed in this world. After the battle, Wang Ling sighed to himself. After the incident with President Bai, he felt that he had gained a lot of inspiration. There was nothing wrong with a person working hard to make himself better. However, in order to make oneself better, one must build on the foundation of one's own efforts. Sacrificing the happiness of others to make oneself better was not called hard work, but a sin. Wang Ling sighed. He turned around and prepared to step out of the void boundary. But at that moment, Wang Ling suddenly noticed something he had overlooked. The situation was not as simple as he had imagined. Baizhi had been completely destroyed by him. Regardless of whether he was a church or an earthling, he no longer existed. Logically speaking, after Wang Ling had eliminated Baizhi, the void boundary he was in should have been automatically lifted. But the void boundary in front of him still showed no signs of collapsing. Even after death, can the void boundary still be preserved? Wang Ling was secretly amazed at how troublesome these void creatures were. Fortunately, he had been the one fighting Su Bai just now. If it had been anyone else, even if they had the ability to get rid of Su Bai, Wang Ling might not have been able to get out of this void boundary. So here was the problem in front of Wang Ling now. How to deal with this void boundary was a huge problem. The void boundary was a kind of domain ability of the void creatures. Since it was a domain ability, it definitely had something to do with the world behind the void gate. There's no other way. At that moment, Wang Ling frowned inwardly. If this thing was directly destroyed, it would probably create a very terrifying spatial tide, which would be similar to a black hole swallowing everything up. This would cause massive damage to the city he lived in. For now, Wang Ling's idea was to send this void boundary back to where it belonged, to its own place to go. At that moment, Wang Ling raised his sword fingers and silently recited a spell. In less than a few seconds, a huge teleportation formation was completed. This was one of the branches of the heavenly Tao spell, Great Transmission Spell. Return spell, which could return anything to its original owner, or even the world. Gu Xuanji should be very familiar with this spell. It was one of the spells required to cultivate as a keeper of order, and was usually used mainly to correct some space-time distortions. When space-time distortions took place, the creatures of many worlds would be teleported to and fro. Some people would see strange spirit beasts, vegetation, and even extraterrestrial creatures that had never appeared in their own world. Some of these phenomena might not be an illusion. 30 seconds later, the transmission began. It was accompanied by a golden beam of transmission light that pierced the sky. Wang Ling directly disappeared from Songhai City, along with the void boundary that Su Bai had left behind. The unknown black ball of spirit power in number 60 high has disappeared. At that moment, a police officer who had been evacuating the nearby crowd said in a frightened voice, "With the void boundary gone, that tremendous sense of oppression also disappeared. The crisis had been averted." Some of the police officers hugged each other, while others directly collapsed to the ground in exhaustion. Although the pressure inside Su Bai's void boundary was the greatest, the pressure radiating from the outside was still very strong. Golden core cultivators working in such an environment could have a nervous breakdown at any time. But the more dangerous it was, the more they had to step forward. This was their duty. It was also their mission to protect the lives and property of all cultivators. Good job, everyone. Good job, everyone who went against the flow. As the temporary commander, Audiobook encouraged all the police officers who had bravely stepped forward. Looking in the direction of number 60 high school, which had already been completely reduced to ruins, he felt a little complicated. It had already been completely demolished. It looked like the construction team would be able to move in tomorrow and build a new school building, a new sports field, a new gymnasium, and the newest spirit gathering array. But Audiobook was also a little puzzled. The void boundary had indeed disappeared. Where had his Shifu gone? Meanwhile, elsewhere, when Wang Ling opened his eyes, he was already in a world full of light. This is... Wang Ling looked around expressionlessly. If his guess was right, he had probably been teleported along with the void boundary. Both of them had been teleported back to the world of the void. "Was it you who killed Su Bai?" At that moment, a deep and hollow voice rang out in the world. "You are?" Wang Ling had no respect at all. "I am your great master of the void," the voice replied. Wang Ling. Chapter 1261. The world of the void wasn't too different from what he had imagined. It was somewhat similar to the God realm, but there were differences. The God world was also a glorious and beautiful scene. However, the only difference from the void world was that it had dense vegetation. Gods, when they had nothing better to do, liked to take care of some flowers and plants. Actually, this was very normal. However, there was nothing in the void world. It could almost be described as a blank space. Wang Ling recalled what the Sun Spirit had said to him before. Behind the void gate is nothing but emptiness. Now Wang Ling suddenly understood what on earth this meant. He could sense that there were countless ethereal spirits floating around in the air, invisible to the naked eye. They were like mayflies in the depths of the sea. Even though they were densely packed, they seemed unusually small in comparison to the entire world. This is the void world. How is it? Are you tempted? At that moment, the Lord of the Void's words interrupted his train of thought. Wang Ling wasn't in a hurry to act. Even though the Void Master's tone made him feel uncomfortable, he didn't care. What was more, it had never been in his nature to make the first move. Never make the first move. This was one of the rules of the Cathayan military. After all, they had only just met, and the other party had not done anything to him. It seemed a little too overbearing to kill him. Join the void, become a citizen of the void, and you will be able to enjoy the taste of the pinnacle. The Void Lord continued. You can enjoy the lives of everyone here. You can even rule over your own world. Wang Ling was puzzled. The Void Master replied. It's mainly about thinking. The minds of the people behind the Void Gate are all connected. This time Wang Ling understood. It seemed that the spiritual life of the ethereal church was entirely reliant on fantasy. That's a little low. In any case, it was all fantasy. Wouldn't it be better to find a book to read? At this point, he didn't plan to stay any longer. He had thought that the Void Master would be very capable, but it turned out that he was just a king of lust. Wang Ling cast a spell with his hands, intending to use the return spell to bring himself back to his original world. To Wang Ling's surprise, the Lord of the Void had no intention of stopping them. In fact, it was the Void Master who had saved his life. It was just that before Wang Ling left, he left 2 words for him. I know that the imaginary world you think doesn't really exist. But have you ever thought that perhaps living itself is the greatest fantasy? These were the first words the Lord of the Void had left Wang Ling. Then he said, "You've indeed killed White Void." The emptiness of the real world no longer existed. But this king wants to remind you that the emptiness in your imagination, you will never be able to destroy it. As soon as he finished speaking, Wang Ling's figure completely disappeared from the world of nothingness. After a few more minutes, the Void Lord's voice came from the silent void world again. What a shocking power. It took him a few minutes to compose himself. There was a reason why Subai lost. Even the Master of the Void was afraid of this terrifying pressure. "I am your great Master of the Void," he had said at the very beginning. In fact, when the Void Lord said this, he already knew. After saying that, there was a 50% chance that the youth in front of him would slap him to death. But for the sake of his dignity as a king, the Void Master braced himself and tried. Luckily, Wang Ling wasn't angered by what he had said. At that time, the Void Master had sighed in his heart. After all, this was a man who had undergone 9 years of compulsory education. His character was indeed different. "Great Lord, are we just going to let him go like this?" At that moment, the voices of the other spirits came from the side. "That's all I have to say. That's enough." The Void Master shook his head. The truth was clear. There was nothing he could do to stop Wang Ling from leaving. Furthermore, the Void Master knew very well. There was only one person who could ignore the Void Gate and freely enter and exit the Void World by himself. It wasn't wrong for White Void to die at the hands of such a person. "Are we going to be defeated?" Nearby, many ethereal beings asked. The last 2 sentences I left him said it all. The Void Master was silent for a moment, then said, "We can't stop White Void from dying, nor can we stop him from obstructing our operation." At this point, it seemed that the plan to invade the Void had completely failed with White Void's death. But just as all the spirits were feeling disappointed, the Void Master said, "Failure is only temporary. Even if we can't find the Son of the Void in the short term, they will eventually become citizens of the Void and return to the Void." After Wang Ling returned from the world of the Void, the ethereal spirits that had already invaded the human body began to leave the human body in various forms. Perhaps they were still wandering around Earth and couldn't return to the world of the Void. But Wang Ling knew that this was the Void Master's way of showing weakness. He remembered what the Void Master had told him before he had left the world of the Void. Wang Ling couldn't help but ponder the profound meaning behind these words. White Void in the fantasy world. For some reason, Wang Ling had a bad feeling about this. He used the many great Tao in his body to sense it, and once again confirmed that White Void had completely disappeared. In this world and other worlds, the emptiness of all the worlds no longer existed. But Wang Ling was particularly concerned about the Void Master's words. When he got home, it was already the early morning of Friday, the 25th. Wang Ling received a message from Audiobook. "Shifu, the cultivators who were diagnosed as having been invaded by the spirits have really returned to normal. As expected of Shifu, this time, it could be said that the creatures of the Void have been completely defeated. Also, you don't have to worry about number 60 high school. The construction team will arrive this morning, and the construction will be completed in 3 days. Classes will start next Monday." Wang Ling was extremely calm when he read this message. There was no doubt that Audiobook had rendered meritorious service again. In the future, Audiobook's personal achievements would be added to the list. History would call it the night of 112,660 high school's demolition. Following the retreat of the creatures of the void, the tense situation at the headquarters also subsided, and Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was released. Later, Wang Ling heard that General Yi had indeed been invaded by the creatures of the void. Fortunately, the spirits had retreated in time, allowing General Yi to return to normal. If they had been any later, the head of state might have already given the order to kill them. Everything seemed to have been resolved satisfactorily, but Wang Ling still felt that he had missed something. That morning, Wang Ling received a message from the class group chat. It was said that Lotus Sun had suddenly fallen seriously ill. Furthermore, she had already been sent to the ICU. The error-free chapter of the daily life of the Immortal King will continue to be updated on Green Bean. There are no advertisements on the site, so please bookmark and recommend Green Bean. If you like the daily life of the Immortal King, please bookmark. The daily life of the Immortal King, Green Bean updates the fastest. Chapter 1262. It was Hirogua who first told him about it. Perhaps he had received some intelligence from one of his uncles, but he was extremely worried about her current situation. Then, as Wang Ling had expected, the class group exploded. Super-chan. What kind of feeling is this? Wasn't everything fine before? Hirogua. Super-chan, don't talk, I'm scared. Super-chan. Su Xiao. It's strange. I just checked the lecture notes with Sun classmate yesterday. Her face was very good. He doesn't look sick at all. Hirogua. I can't say for sure. My uncle said that Huagua Water Curtain Group organized an expert consultation last night, and all the famous doctors in Songhai City, who were free, were invited. Some doctors have just retired from the epidemic prevention station, and they rushed over as soon as they received the application. Do you have any specific information? What kind of illness is it? In the class chat group, everyone was very worried. They couldn't help with anything else, but with Huagua Water Curtain Group's financial resources, they probably wouldn't be short of money. The only thing he could do was to pray. At that moment, Hirogua frowned and typed again. Strange, that's the strange part. I heard that more than a dozen experts have already examined her, but they still haven't figured out what's wrong with her. The comments in the class group made Wang Ling frown deeply. After the 9 Dragon Mountain competition, he had visited Lotus Sun as a representative. He even secretly examined Lotus Sun's body. There were no obvious abnormalities on his body. There was no curse of the Yin-Yang death tribulation that Old Man Sun was worried about. Now, as soon as the void retreated, Lotus Sun fell seriously ill. Wang Ling felt that there was something very fishy about the whole thing. Now, can the Son of the Void lock onto the area? Wang Ling asked Book of Sage Immortal. After he returned from the Void World, Book of Sage Immortal had also obtained more data and information. At present, he had successfully reduced the scope. As Wang Ling had expected, Lotus Sun was the child of the Void. On the boys' side, there were still 2 pairs of them. The probability of winning was about the same. One was the secretary of Huagua Water Curtain Group, Jiang Xiaoche, and the other was General Yi's adopted son, Yi Jiang. Both of them are currently at 50%. Wang Ling knew very well that if Lotus Sun's current illness had something to do with the evacuation of the void, no matter which one of them was the son of the void, it was possible that one of them would suffer from the same illness at the same time. But the result was different from what he had imagined. According to the results of Book of Sage Immortal's investigation, at the moment, Jiang Xiaoche was still fine. Although Yi Jiang was indeed in the hospital, the main purpose of his hospitalization was psychological counseling, and he wasn't suffering from a life-threatening serious illness, like Lotus Sunday. There's no other way. At that moment, Wang Ling sighed slightly in his heart. He felt that the whole story was not that simple. There was something strange about Lotus Sun's illness. He had to trace it back to the source. Otherwise, even if Wang Ling cast a spell to save him, it would only be a matter of time. Therefore, before the results of the investigation were out, he could only do his best to help Lotus Sun stall for time. After all, they were classmates. Moreover, it was only a slight effort on his part. Then he opened the cabinet next to him and prepared to draw talisman paper himself. Come and help. Wang Ling looked at Loopy Toad. Loopy Toad walked over, turned into its human form, and started to cut the talisman paper according to Wang Ling's instructions. What talisman are you drawing? Death Substitute Talisman, said Wang Ling. Loopy Toad nodded. This was a type of talisman that was similar to a resurrection coin. It could be activated at a critical moment to save a person's life. But if an ordinary Dao cultivator wanted to draw a death substitute talisman like this, apart from consuming a huge amount of spirit power, it would also take decades or even centuries of hard work before one could be developed. A talisman like this could be casually drawn and directly mass-produced. Wang Ling was the only one in the world. His young master Ling was too heaven-defying. If an ordinary person were to see this scene, they would definitely be horrified. But Loopy Toad was different, because Wang Ling had shocked it so much that it was already numb to it. It went without saying how powerful the death substitute talisman that Wang Ling had drawn himself was. If Lotus Sun really suffered a fatal injury, this talisman would not only capture her soul, it would also help her recover from her physical injuries. All morning, the gremlins in the Wang family's small villa were mobilized. Using limited materials, they drew 3,000 death substitute talismans. It was close to noon. These 3,000 death substitute talismans had already started to take effect, and 2 had been burned. As Wang Ling had expected, there was indeed something strange about this illness. In a normal situation, even if it was an incurable disease, as long as the death substitute talisman that Wang Ling had drawn himself was present, there was no doubt that she would survive. There was no need for a second talisman at all. Wang Ling observed that the time between the 2 death substitute talismans was about an hour. One had to be burned in an hour? Wang Ling frowned deeply. He was even more certain now. This definitely wasn't an illness. Instead, someone with ulterior motives was cursing behind his back. Furthermore, the person behind this was probably very cunning. Wang Ling stayed at home for a while longer. He observed the consumption of the death substitute talismans. At around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the bad news came again. Wang Ling noticed that the rate at which the death substitute talismans burned was increasing. Previously, 1 talisman had been used every hour, but now it was used every 50 minutes. Looking at this growth rate, the consumption of the death substitute talismans would only get faster and faster. This was the reason why he had stayed at home to observe. There was actually a curse in this world that could adapt to his death substitute talismans. Wang Ling was utterly astonished. It seemed that for the time being, he couldn't get away to investigate the matter in detail. He had to draw the death substitute talismans himself. Otherwise, Lotus Sun's life would be in danger. Wang Ling quickly called Grenade-Throwing Senior Immortal. One was to have Grenade-Throwing Senior Immortal go to the hospital on his behalf to investigate the situation. Wang Ling still had a king's eye in Grenade-Throwing Senior Immortal's hands, so even if he didn't go there himself, he might still be able to find some clues. The second thing was to have Battle Sect provide him with the materials to make the talismans. Although Wang Ling could mass-produce the death substitute talismans, the consumption of materials was enormous. Wang Ling had already used up all the stock in his drawer. Furthermore, the materials he had bought were the cheapest ones on the market. With Battle Sect's resources, the higher the quality of the materials, the higher the strength of the talismans would naturally be. Brotherling, should I give my soul suppression ring to classmate Lotus Sun? Grenade-Throwing Senior Immortal suddenly asked. No, that won't work, Wang Ling replied. Although the soul suppression ring also had the effect of resurrection, it couldn't be used in a situation where someone was cursed to death. To trigger the soul suppression ring's effect, the person's body had to be fatally injured. He couldn't just give the ring to Lotus Sun, and then send an executioner to stab her when he saw that she was about to die, so that she would be stabbed and come back to life at the same time. That was too cruel. Will he eventually return to the void? After the call with Grenade-Throwing Senior Immortal, Wang Ling recalled what the Lord of the Void had said. These words didn't provoke Wang Ling. Instead, he felt a little excited. In fact, he was a little excited. It looked like the Lord of the Void was challenging him. In all his years, this was the first time that a creature had questioned his ability. The Lord of the Void thought that he didn't have the ability to stop the Son of the Void from returning to the Void world. But it was still unknown who would emerge victorious. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.